Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto in World of One Piece for mating with Nami, Robin and Boa Hancock. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A Storm of Gold and Orange. The world returned to Naruto Uzumaki not as a gentle dawn, but as a violent, screaming birth. One moment, he was in the blinding, sterile light of Kagaya's dimension, locked in a final, desperate struggle. He had poured every last ounce of his and Kurama's chakra into a sealing jutsu, a frantic, last-ditch effort as the rabbit goddess tore a hole in reality itself. The last thing he saw was her malevolent, panicked eyes in a swirling vortex of impossible colors. The last thing he felt was a sensation of being turned inside out, his very atoms unspooled across dimensions. The next moment, there was sound. A deafening, percussive roar that vibrated through his bones. The smell of salt and ozone filled his lungs, a sharp, clean scent tainted by the acrid stench of gunpowder. He was falling. The sky was a brilliant, impossible blue, a shade deeper than he had ever seen, dotted with clouds so white they hurt to look at. Below him was a churning sea of sapphire and turquoise, a vast, unbroken expanse of water that terrified and mesmerized him in equal measure. He had seen oceans on scrolls, but to witness one in person, to be falling into its endless maw, it was humbling. But the ocean wasn't empty. It was the stage for a war. Dozens of stark white ships, emblazoned with a seagull emblem, formed a closing crescent. Their cannons belched fire and smoke, sending black iron spheres of death hurtling through the air. Their target was a single, smaller vessel that looked impossibly cheerful for a warship. It had a sunny, smiling lion for a figurehead and a vibrant green lawn on its deck. But the cheerfulness was a lie. Its main mast was splintered, its sails were riddled with holes, and patches of its hull were charred black. It was cornered, wounded, and moments from being sent to a watery grave. Naruto's shinobi instincts, honed by a lifetime of war, took over before his conscious mind could even process the absurdity of his situation. He righted himself in midair, drawing on the dregs of the six paths power that still hummed beneath his skin. He floated, a tiny speck of orange against the vast blue canvas, his tattered black and orange jacket flapping in the wind. He was exhausted, his chakra coils screaming in protest, his body a map of aches and deep, soul-crushing weariness. He had just saved his world. He didn't have the strength for another fight. But on the deck of that sunny ship, he saw people. A young woman with vibrant orange hair frantically spinning a ship's wheel, her face a mask of determined terror. A tall, black-haired woman in purple, her expression an unreadable calm as she watched the approaching doom. A swordsman with green hair and 3 blades, his body covered in wounds but his stance unbroken. A cook in a black suit, his leg wreathed in flame as he kicked a cannonball back at the enemy. A long-nosed marksman, a small, panicked reindeer, a cyborg covered in steel, and a living skeleton in a top hat. And at the prow, a boy in a straw hat with a grin that was far too wide for their current predicament, his arms stretched to impossible lengths. They were fighting. They were losing. But they were fighting together. That simple fact resonated with a part of Naruto's soul that was more fundamental than chakra or jutsu. It was the core of his entire being, the unbreakable will to protect one's comrades. His exhaustion, his confusion, his despair at being torn from his home, it all evaporated, replaced by the familiar, white-hot certainty of purpose. "Looks like they could use a hand," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Kurama grumbled in the back of his mind, a deep, rumbling sound of weary agreement. "Just make it quick, Kit. I'm not sure how much more of this dimensional nonsense I can take." On the deck of the Thousand Sunny, chaos reigned. "Nami, hard to port. Frankie, give us a coup de burst, now. Monkey D." Luffy yelled, his voice strained. "I can't, Captain," Frankie shouted back from below deck, the sounds of hammering echoing his words. "The engine took a direct hit. We're super sitting ducks. The new pacifistas are the problem," Sanji grunted, landing on the deck after deflecting another cannonball. His black suit was scuffed, his tie askew. "They're faster than the old models, and their lasers are stronger. We can't get close." He was right. Interspersed between the standard marine battleships were 5 hulking, Bare-eared behemoths. They looked like clones of their crewmate, Bartholomew Kuma, but their eyes were cold, dead optics. One of them raised a hand, its palm glowing with yellow light. Incoming! Zoro roared, tensing his muscles. He was already breathing heavily, a deep gash bleeding freely on his shoulder. Nami watched the beam of light form, her knuckles white on the ship's helm. Her mind, a finely tuned calculator of angles, wind speeds, and survival odds, came up with a single, horrifying answer: 0. The beam would pierce their hull right below the waterline. They would sink in minutes. There was nowhere to dodge, no way to block it. This was it. After everything they had been through, Enies Lobby, Thriller Bark, Sabayati, Dressrosa, they were going to die here. In an anonymous patch of the New World, at the hands of a man she had never even seen. Her eyes flickered to the flagship of the enemy fleet. Standing on its foredeck was a man in a crisp white vice admiral's coat. He was tall and unnaturally thin, with a face like a porcelain mask, utterly devoid of emotion. Vice Admiral Kageyama, they called him the silent executioner. He didn't grandstand or shout about justice. He simply appeared, and you ceased to exist. He was a monster of cold, efficient bureaucracy. Just as the pacifista fired, a scream tore through the sky. It wasn't human. It was the sound of reality being ripped like old parchment. A vortex of swirling black and violet opened high above them, and from it, a figure fell. A flash of orange. What the hell is that? Usopp shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. The figure stopped falling. It just hung there, suspended in the air 100 feet above the ocean. Then, he moved. Naruto vanished in a flicker of movement. So fast it seemed less like speed and more like teleportation. He appeared directly in the path of the pacifista's laser beam, a river of golden destruction that could melt steel. The Straw Hats cried out in alarm, thinking this strange person was committing suicide. But he didn't try to dodge. He didn't even seem to brace himself. He simply raised a hand, and a small, black sphere, no larger than his fist, materialized in front of him. The world-destroying laser slammed into the tiny black orb and vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't deflect. It was simply absorbed, consumed without a sound, without a ripple of displaced air. Silence fell over the battlefield. The cannons stopped firing. The Marines on their decks stared, mouths agape. On the Thousand Sunny, the Straw Hats were frozen in disbelief. Did you see that? Nami whispered, her voice trembling. Nico Robin's eyes, usually calm and analytical, were wide with something that bordered on shock. His energy, it's not hockey. It's something else entirely. It feels ancient, alive. Zoro's hand tightened on the hilt of his swords. He wasn't looking at the impossible feat of physics. He was looking at the boy. The sheer, unadulterated power rolling off him in waves was suffocating. It was different from an admiral's, different from a Yonko's. Their power felt like a force of nature. This felt divine. Naruto floated for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the enemy fleet. His blue eyes, now glowing with a golden light and marked by the cross slits of sage mode, held no malice. Only a profound, weary sadness. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't wanted any more fighting. But these people had threatened his he didn't know what they were. But they were in trouble. And that was enough. Let's end this, Kurama. All right. A torrent of golden red energy erupted from Naruto's body. It was so dense, so potent, that the very air seemed to thicken, the sea below boiling where it touched the surface. The energy coalesced behind him, forming 9 titanic tails of pure, malevolent power. Then, from his back, 2 colossal arms made of the same molten gold energy burst forth, each one larger than a marine battleship. They were monstrous, clawed things that seemed to promise nothing but destruction. On the flagship, Vice Admiral Kageyama's impassive mask finally cracked. A sliver of what might have been fear entered his eyes. All ships, concentrate fire on that thing. Now, the cannons roared back to life. 100 iron balls flew towards Naruto. He didn't even flinch. The 2 chakra arms moved with a speed that defied their size. One swatted the cannonballs out of the air as if they were flies. The other lunged forward, stretching across the water in a heartbeat. The golden claws closed around the hull of the nearest battleship. There was a deafening groan of tortured metal. The entire warship, a fortress of steel and wood weighing thousands of tons, was lifted from the water. The chakra arms squeezed, and the ship crumpled like a piece of paper, its crew screaming as they were plunged into the sea. Naruto tossed the ruined hulk aside, and the second arm struck, its claws tearing another battleship in half from stem to stern. It was a massacre. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Luffy's jaw was on the floor, his eyes sparkling with childish wonder. "So cool. What kind of devil fruit is that?" Sanji exclaimed, his cigarette falling from his lips. "That's no devil fruit," Robin said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's something else. Something from another world." Naruto ignored the chaos he was creating. His eyes were locked on the flagship. He knew from experience that cutting off the head of the snake was the quickest way to end a fight. He brought his hands together in front of his chest. A small, blue sphere of spiraling energy formed in his palm. But it didn't stop there. Wind-natured chakra, impossibly sharp and volatile, poured into the sphere. It expanded, 4 massive blades of pure wind screaming into existence around the core. The sound it produced was a piercing, deafening shriek that drowned out the cannon fire, the explosions, and the screams. It was the sound of 1,000,000 birds chirping, 1,000 winds howling, a world being torn apart. The light it emitted was brighter than the sun, forcing everyone, Straw Hat and Marine alike, to shield their eyes. Futon. Chudama Recentrican. He drew his arm back and threw it. The massive shuriken of wind and energy didn't fly so much as it erased the distance between him and the flagship. It moved with terrifying speed. A vortex of destruction that left a trench in the surface of the sea in its wake. Vice Admiral Kageyama had only a single second to comprehend his doom. He saw the spinning sphere of death approaching. He saw the face of the golden-haired boy, his expression not one of anger, but of grim resolution. His mind, the cold, calculating machine that had orchestrated the destruction of countless pirate crews, simply could not process what was happening. This power was not on any chart. It did not exist in the world government's databases. It was an anomaly, an impossibility. His last thought was a simple, shattering realization. We picked a fight with a god. The Recentrican struck the flagship. There was no explosion, no boom, no fireball. There was only light, and then, silence. A massive dome of white, swirling energy expanded outwards, engulfing the ship completely. Inside that dome, on a microscopic level, trillions of impossibly sharp wind blades were varying every molecular bond in their path. The ship, its cannons, its crew, the Vice Admiral himself, they weren't blown apart. They were atomized. They simply ceased to be. When the dome of light receded a few seconds later, there was nothing left, not a splinter of wood, not a scrap of metal, not even a ripple in the water where the flagship had been. It was just gone. The remaining marine ships stopped firing. The pacifistas froze, their targeting systems unable to find their primary command vessel. A profound, terrified silence settled over the sea. The surviving marines stared at the empty space, then at the golden glowing figure floating in the sky, and their discipline finally broke. One ship turned to flee. Then another. Within a minute, the entire Buster Call fleet was in a full, panicked retreat, desperate to escape the monster that had just unmade their commander. As the last ship disappeared over the horizon, the immense golden chakra surrounding Naruto flickered and died. The 9 tails and giant arms dissolved into nothing. The golden glow in his eyes faded, leaving them a deep, startling blue once more. The 6 paths power that had sustained him retreated, and the full weight of his exhaustion slammed back into him with the force of a physical blow. His vision swam. The world tilted on its axis. He had nothing left. He had poured the very last dregs of his strength into that final attack. He fell from the sky, a limp, unconscious form plummeting towards the churning sea. "He's falling," Chopper cried out in his high-pitched voice. "Sanji, go get him," Luffy ordered. But before the cook could even move, a flurry of limbs sprouted from the deck of the Sunny. "Gigantsko Mono," Robin called out, her arms crossed in front of her. 2 giant arms, formed from hundreds of smaller ones, erupted from the railing and caught Naruto's falling body gently, cradling him as if he were a child. They deposited him softly onto the green lawn of the deck. The straw hats gathered around him, their expressions a mixture of awe, suspicion, and concern. He looked so young up close. Barely older than Luffy. His face, relaxed in unconsciousness, was free of the godly power it had held moments before. He looked peaceful. His orange and black jacket was torn and scorched, and there were cuts and bruises all over him, old wounds from a battle they couldn't imagine. Chopper, in his human reindeer form, immediately began his examination. His pulse is weak, but steady. He's suffering from extreme exhaustion. I've never seen anything like it. It's like every cell in his body is completely drained of energy. Quote, Nami stared down at the boy who had just saved them. Her heart was still hammering against her ribs. One moment she was facing certain death, the next, this, his force of nature appeared from nowhere and wiped out a Buster Call fleet like it was an inconvenience. The power he wielded was terrifying. It was the kind of power that could topple nations, that could challenge the world government itself. Her pragmatic mind was already spinning with the implications, the strategic advantage he represented. But as she looked at his face, at the faint lines of stress around his eyes even in sleep, her thoughts softened. He was just a boy who had looked so sad before he unleashed hell. His eyelids fluttered. His eyes, a blue so deep it felt like you could fall into them, slowly opened. They were hazy, unfocused. He tried to push himself up, his muscles trembling with the effort. Is it over? He rasped, his voice barely audible. His gaze drifted from face to face, not with fear, but with a genuine, desperate concern. Is everyone safe? The question hung in the air. He wasn't asking about himself. After everything he had just done, after falling unconscious from the sky, his first thought was for them. For strangers. Nami found her voice first. She knelt beside him, her expression softening completely. The navigator, the strategist, the thief, they all faded away, leaving only the woman who had once been a frightened girl, saved by an unconditional act of kindness. Yes, she said, her voice softer than she intended. It's over. We're safe. Thanks to you. A faint, tired smile touched Naruto's lips. Good, he whispered, and with that, his eyes rolled back, and he slipped back into the depths of unconsciousness. As the Straw Hats began the process of securing their unexpected guest and repairing their ship, none of them noticed the patch of sea where the dimensional rift had opened. The water there was unnaturally still, dark, and cold. The vibrant, life-filled currents of the new world seemed to bend around it, as if afraid to touch it. It was a scar on the skin of the world, silent and unseen. Deep below, in the crushing blackness of the abyss, something stirred. A creature of the deep, a leviathan that had slumbered for centuries, had been warped by the residual energy of the rift. Its eyes, once dark and simple, now glowed with a faint, violet light. It was no longer a simple beast of the sea. It was a sentinel, an anchor. It felt the lingering essence of the being that had passed through, the sheer, overwhelming life force. And it felt the void that had been left behind. It turned its massive head, its new, alien intelligence focusing on the distant, retreating speck of the Thousand Sunny. It did not move to follow. It simply watched, and waited. A signal had been sent. The beacon was lit. The great, silent hunger that drifted between worlds had a new scent to follow. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Cartographer, the Archaeologist, and the Shinobi. Naruto woke to the gentle rocking of the sea and the scent of antiseptic herbs. The world swam into focus slowly. He was lying in a small, cozy bed, a soft blanket tucked up to his chin. The room was a marvel of curved wood and meticulous organization, shelves packed with medical texts and jars of colorful powders. Sunlight streamed through a round porthole, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, a blissful, terrifying moment, he thought he was in a hospital back in Konoha. Then the memories returned. The vortex, the fall, the battle, the faces of strangers. A small, furry creature with antlers and a blue nose was perched on a stool beside him, carefully grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. It noticed he was awake and let out a surprised yelp, nearly dropping its tools. You're awake. That's great. Don't try to move too much. You had complete chakra, energy exhaustion. I've never seen anything like it. I gave you a nutrient drip and a mild sedative. How are you feeling? The creature spoke with the earnest, high-pitched voice of a child, but its eyes held the focused concern of a seasoned doctor. I feel like I was run over by a herd of summons. Naruto admitted, his voice a dry rasp. He tried to sit up, and a wave of dizziness forced him back down. Where am I? You're on our ship, the Thousand Sunny. My name is Tony Chopper. I'm the ship's doctor, the reindeer announced proudly. Luffy's our captain. He wanted to thank you for, saving us from being blown to smithereens. The door creaked open, and the rest of the crew peeked in. The boy in the straw hat, Luffy, grinned widely and bounded in, stretching his arm to grab the doorknob from across the room. Hey, you're awake. I'm Luffy. You were awesome. Your arms were all huge and gold and you made that giant spinning thing. Wanna join my crew? Luffy, give him some space. He just woke up. The orange-haired woman, Nami, scolded, pushing him aside. She offered Naruto a hesitant smile. I'm Nami, the navigator. We're all really grateful for what you did. Introductions were made. Sanji, the cook, brought him a tray of warm, savory rice porridge that tasted like heaven. Zoro, the swordsman, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his one visible eye scrutinizing Naruto with an intensity that was unnerving. Usopp, the marksman, regaled him with a heavily exaggerated tale of his own bravery during the battle. Frankie, the cyborg, gave him a booming, super welcome. Brook, the skeleton, played a soft melody on his violin. And Robin, the dark-haired archaeologist, simply watched him with a calm, knowing smile that made him feel like she could see right through him. They were a strange, chaotic, but undeniably warm group. It reminded him so much of Team 7, of all his friends back home, that a sharp, painful pang of loss lanced through his chest. He pushed it down. He couldn't afford to break, not now. Later, once he was strong enough to walk, they gathered in the ship's galley, a comfortable room filled with the delicious aroma of Sanji's cooking. The interrogation, as he knew it would be, began. So, Nami started, placing a cup of tea in front of him. Her demeanor was friendly, but her eyes were sharp, analytical. That power, it's not a devil fruit, is it? Robin said it felt different. Naruto shook his head, taking a sip of the tea. No, it's called chakra. It's the energy that flows through every living thing where I'm from. I was trained from birth to control and shape it. Where are you from? Zoro's voice was a low rumble. It wasn't an idle question, it was a demand. This was the part he had rehearsed in his head. The truth was impossible. A lie was necessary. A lie that was as close to the truth as he could manage. A place very, very far away, he began, looking at his hands. An isolated continent, hidden from the rest of the world by treacherous seas and other things. We call it the elemental nations. We don't have devil fruits or marines. We have shinobi, warriors who use chakra to perform techniques we call jutsu. He looked up, meeting their eyes. There was a war, a terrible one. We won, but in the final battle, there was an accident. A jutsu that tore a hole in the world. It sent me here. He let the last part hang in the air, imbued with all the genuine pain and loss he felt. It wasn't a lie. Robin's expression softened with understanding. She, more than anyone, knew what it was to be the sole survivor of a destroyed home. So you're all alone, Chopper said, his eyes tearing up. Naruto gave a small, sad smile. Yeah, I guess I am. Luffy, who had been listening with surprising intensity, slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. Then that settles it. You don't have a place to go, and you're super strong. You're joining my crew. I'm not looking to join a pirate crew, Naruto said quickly. The word, pirate, still conjured images of greedy, marauding thugs. We're not like other pirates. Luffy insisted. We're free. We go on adventures. We'll table the recruitment discussion for now, Nami interjected, shooting Luffy a warning glance. Right now, we need to find an island to get supplies and properly repair the Sunny. And you, she said, her gaze fixing on Naruto, need to rest. You're our guest. For now. The unspoken, we're sure you're not going to vaporize us in our sleep, was clear. Naruto understood. He was an unknown quantity, a weapon of mass destruction who had appeared out of thin air. Trust had to be earned. It always did. 2 days later, they spotted it, an island that seemed to have been pulled from a dream. From a distance, it was a riot of color, a painter's palette of emerald green, ruby red, and sapphire blue. Nami identified it on her charts as Chromia, an uninhabited island famous among sailors for its unique, perpetually blooming flora and its rainbow-colored shores, where the sand was made of crushed, colorful minerals. It was supposed to be a paradise, the perfect place to lay low and make repairs. As the Thousand Sunny dropped anchor in a turquoise lagoon, the beauty was breathtaking. The air was heavy with the sweet perfume of a million flowers. Trees with bark like polished silver bore fruits that shimmered with an inner light. Strange, beautiful birds with jewel-toned feathers flitted through the canopy. "This place is super gorgeous," Frankie exclaimed, striking a pose. The crew was eager to explore. Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper ran off into the jungle with nets and specimen jars. Their whoops of excitement echoing through the trees. Sanji went in search of rare culinary ingredients. Frankie and Zoro stayed behind to work on the ship's repairs. Brook found a shady spot to compose a new song inspired by the island's beauty. Naruto, Nami, and Robin decided to venture into the island's interior. As they walked, a strange sense of unease began to creep over Naruto. His sage abilities, always subtly connected to the natural world around him, were picking up something wrong. The vibrant life energy of the island felt muted, as if being heard through thick cotton. The first sign that something was truly amiss was the small settlement they found in a clearing. It was a ghost town. Simple wooden houses stood empty, their doors swinging gently in the breeze. A market square was deserted. Stalls still laden with strange, colorful vegetables that were slowly beginning to rot. There was no sign of struggle, no bodies. It was just empty. Then they saw him, an old man, sitting on the steps of what looked like a town hall. He was staring blankly into the distance, his eyes unfocused. "Excuse me," Nami called out, approaching cautiously. "Sir, can you tell us what happened here?" The old man didn't seem to hear her at first. He slowly turned his head, and his eyes were dull, lifeless pits. There was no spark of curiosity, no fear, no emotion at all. "Happened," he repeated, his voice a dry, toneless rasp. "Nothing happened. Nothing ever happens. But the town, it's empty." "Where did everyone go?" Robin asked, her voice gentle. The man shrugged, a slow, listless gesture. "Did they? I hadn't noticed." "It doesn't matter." He turned his gaze back to the empty space in front of him, his brief flicker of awareness gone. A chill ran down Naruto's spine. It wasn't just sadness or depression. It was a void, an absolute absence of feeling. As they backed away, they noticed more of it. The brilliant red flowers at the edge of the clearing were tinged with gray at their petals. A piece of shimmering fruit Naruto picked from a tree tasted like dust and ash in his mouth. The island's beauty was a facade, a painted mask over a creeping, deep-seated decay. "So, mething is draining the life from this place," Robin murmured, her hand tracing the gray edge of a leaf. "Not just the plants, the people, too, their spirit, their emotions, it's all being leached away." Nami pulled out a half-finished map of the island's coastline. "I need to get to a high vantage point, see the whole island. Maybe we can spot the source of this from above." "I'll go with you," Naruto offered. The feeling of being watched was growing stronger, and he didn't want her going alone. Robin nodded. "There are some ancient-looking ruins marked on the old charts, deeper inland. I believe I will investigate them. This phenomenon feels unnatural. Perhaps its history is recorded somewhere." They split up. As Naruto and Nami climbed a steep, winding path towards the island's central peak, the wrongness intensified. The birdsong faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. The air grew heavy, thick with an invisible miasma of apathy. Naruto found himself having to consciously push back against a wave of lethargy. A tempting whisper in his mind that said, "Why bother? Just sit down. It doesn't matter." He looked at Nami. She was still moving, her jaw set with determination, but her movements were slower. Her brow furrowed. She was fighting it, too. "This place is trying to make us give up," he said, his voice low. "I don't give up," she replied, her voice tight. "Not when there's a mystery to solve. And definitely not when there's a map to be made." They reached the summit, a windswept plateau that offered a panoramic view of Chromia. Nami immediately unrolled her parchment, pulling out her compass and quills. Her professionalism a shield against the island's influence. She began to sketch, her hands moving with an artist's grace and a scientist's precision. Naruto watched her, fascinated. He had never seen anyone so passionate about lines on a piece of paper. But as he looked at her focused expression, the way her eyes lit up as she captured the curve of a bay or the ridge of a mountain, he understood. This wasn't just paper. This was her dream. This was her way of understanding the world, of taming its vastness, of making it her own. It was the same fire he had when he thought about becoming Hokage, the desire to be acknowledged, to achieve the impossible. "You really love this, don't you?" he asked quietly. She glanced up, a faint blush on her cheeks. "Of course. This is my work. My dream is to draw a map of the entire world." She looked out at the horizon. "It's big, and scary, and most people are content to just sail through it. But I want to know it. Every island, every current, every secret. I want to hold it all in my hands." "That's a great dream," Naruto said, his voice filled with a genuine admiration that surprised her. "Back home, I had a dream like that. Something everyone said was impossible." "Did you achieve it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. A shadow passed over his face. "I did." For a little while, an awkward silence fell between them. To break it, he offered a small smile. "Need help scouting? I can make it faster." He made a simple cross-shaped hand sign. With a puff of smoke, a perfect duplicate of himself appeared beside him. Nami jumped back, letting out a small shriek. "What was that?" "Shadow clone jutsu," Naruto and his clone said in unison. "I can make copies of myself. They can move around, gather information, and when they disappear, all their memories transfer back to me." Nami stared, her navigator's mind racing. The strategic applications were staggering. Reconnaissance, diversions, multi-direction. Attacks. This man wasn't just a cannon, he was an army. "That is the most useful ability I have ever seen." "Go on," Naruto said to his clone. "Do a quick sweep of the northern ridge." The clone nodded and vanished into the trees. The simple act of sharing his ability, of seeing her genuine, practical appreciation for it, forged a small but significant bond between them. He wasn't just a monster anymore. He was useful. He was a potential comrade. Meanwhile, Robin had found the ruins. They were older than she could have imagined, built from a dark, volcanic stone that seemed to absorb the light. A single, crumbling library was still partially intact, its stone shelves lined with decaying scrolls and stone tablets. The air was thick with the dust of ages. For Robin, it was like breathing perfume. She ran her fingers over the eroded carvings, her mind effortlessly translating the ancient script. It told the story of the people who had once lived on Chromia, a peaceful tribe of artists and botanists who worshipped the island's vibrant life. But then, the texts took a dark turn. "The silent star has come," one tablet read. "It bleeds the color from the sky and the passion from our hearts. It is the great emptiness. The hunger that walks. It comes when the world is wounded, drawn to the scar of what was lost." Robin froze. Drawn to the scar, she thought of the strange, dead patch of sea where the boy, Naruto, had appeared. She found another, more frantic carving on a fallen pillar. "It has no body to strike, no mind to break. It feeds on will. It consumes spirit. Only the vibrant pulse of life itself, the very energy of the world, can drive it back into the silence from whence it came." A cold dread settled in her stomach. This was no natural phenomenon. This was an ancient predator. And she had a sinking feeling its arrival was connected to their new guest. She thought of Naruto, a boy who held so much power, yet seemed so utterly alone. She understood that kind of loneliness. For 20 years, she had been the demon of Ohara, a monster to be hunted, with a bounty on her head since she was 8 years old. She had learned to build walls, to never let anyone in, because attachment meant pain. But this boy, he looked at her not with suspicion, but with a simple, open kindness. He didn't see a demon. He just saw her. It was a novel, and terrifying, feeling. She felt a strange kinship with the lost, powerful boy, a shared understanding of being a walking catastrophe, a survivor marked by fate. As Naruto's clone returned to him with a report of nothing unusual, a sudden, piercing scream echoed from the jungle below. "Luffy!" It was Chopper's voice. Without a second's hesitation, Naruto grabbed Nami's arm. "Hold on." Before she could protest, he vanished in a blur of speed. Moving down the mountain so fast the trees became a green smear. They burst into a large clearing to find a horrifying scene. Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper were on their knees, their faces slack and emotionless. Their usual vibrancy was gone, replaced by the same empty apathy as the old man in the village. Standing over them was a creature that defied description. It was humanoid in shape, but its body was formed from shifting gray mist and shadow. It had no face, no features, only a smooth, blank space where a head should be. Light seemed to bend around it, and the very air grew cold and silent in its presence. It was the low-level harbinger Robin had read about. "What is that thing?" Nami gasped, her body trembling. The wave of despair washing off the creature was a physical force, pressing down on her will to fight, to run, to even breathe. The creature turned its blank face towards them. Naruto felt his own fighting spirit begin to ebb, the desire for battle replaced by a crushing sense of futility. But then he saw his new friends on the ground, their eyes empty, and a protective rage he knew well surged through him, burning away the unnatural apathy. "Get back," he yelled at Nami, pushing her behind him. He formed a Rasengan in his palm and charged. He slammed the spiraling sphere of chakra directly into the creature's chest. And it did nothing. The Rasengan passed right through the misty form, dissipating harmlessly against a tree behind it. The creature didn't even flinch. It raised a shadowy arm and pointed a finger at Naruto. He felt a sharp, draining sensation, as if a hook had been plunged into his soul and was pulling his very essence out of him. His energy, his will, his happy memories, they were all being siphoned away, feeding the creature. This was bad. His standard attacks were useless. This thing didn't have a physical body to destroy. It was an enemy of the spirit. Just then, Robin burst into the clearing. "Naruto, don't let it touch you. It feeds on emotion, on will." The text said only the life energy of the world itself can repel it. Life energy of the world. The words clicked in his mind. Nature energy. Senjutsu. "Buy me some time," he yelled, biting his thumb and making a series of hand signs. He slammed his palm on the ground, summoning jutsu. In a puff of smoke, Gamakichi, the giant, pipe-smoking toad, appeared. "Yo, Naruto, whoa, what is that creepy thing?" The toad croaked. "Kichi, keep it busy. Don't let it touch you," Naruto ordered, then sat down and closed his eyes, his hands forming a familiar seal. He had to be perfectly still. He had to draw in the energy of the world around him. The island fought him. The apathetic aura made it difficult to connect with nature, like trying to breathe through a wet cloth. But he pushed, reaching past the gray decay, searching for the vibrant core of life that still existed deep within Chromia. Gamakichi spat massive globs of oil at the shadow creature, forcing it to retreat and reform. Robin sprouted arms from its misty body, trying to restrain it, but they passed right through. The creature ignored them, its full attention on the meditating Naruto. It sensed the power he was gathering, a power that was anathema to its very existence. It glided towards him, its draining aura intensifying. Come on, Naruto thought, sweat beading on his forehead. He felt it, a surge of pure, clean energy flowing into him from the earth, the trees, the very air. The orange pigment of a toad sage appeared around his eyes. He opened them, his pupils now the horizontal bars of a sage. The world looked completely different. He could see the energy flowing through everything. The trees pulsed with a green light, Nami and Robin with a warm orange and purple, and his fallen friends with a flickering, weak blue. But the creature, it was a vortex of absolute black, a hole in the colorful tapestry of life. He stood up, feeling power thrum through him. Sage art. Rasengan. He formed the attack, but this time, it was different. He poured the nature energy directly into it. The sphere became intensely bright, radiating a warmth that felt like the sun. He charged. The creature, sensing the immense life energy, recoiled for the first time. It was afraid. Naruto didn't hesitate. He slammed the vibrant, glowing Rasengan into the center of the shadow's mass. There was no explosion. There was a brilliant flash of pure white light and a high-pitched, ethereal scream. The creature of shadow and apathy could not exist in the presence of so much pure life. It dissolved, turning into dust motes of light that faded away. The moment it was gone, color and life flooded back into the clearing with a tangible rush. The gray on the flowers vanished, returning them to a brilliant crimson. The air felt light and clean. And on the ground, Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper gasped, their eyes regaining their familiar light. "Whoa, I feel like I just took the best nap ever," Luffy said, stretching his arms. "Hey, what did I miss?" Later that evening, back on the Sunny, the crew celebrated their victory with a massive feast courtesy of Sanji. But Naruto was quiet. He stood at the ship's railing, looking back at the vibrant, living island of Chromia, now fully restored. Nami and Robin came to stand beside him. "You're worried," Robin stated, her voice soft. Naruto nodded. "That thing, the energy it gave off. It felt empty, dead. It reminded me of the final enemy I fought at home. But weaker, like an echo." He clenched his fist. "And what you said, Robin. Drawn to the scar. That thing was here because of me. I led it here." "You also defeated it," Nami said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You saved that island, and you saved our friends. We don't blame you, Naruto." He looked at them, at the cartographer with a dream as big as the world and the archaeologist who carried the ghosts of the past. In their eyes, he saw no fear, no suspicion. Only a quiet, steady acceptance. They weren't his old friends. They weren't Team 7, but they were here, and for the first time since he'd arrived in this strange, new world, he didn't feel completely alone. He was a shinobi, a stranger, a living weapon, but maybe, just maybe, he could be their comrade, too. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Serpent's Gaze. The days following their departure from Chromia were filled with intense productivity. While Frankie supervised the final repairs on the Sunny, the rest of the crew found themselves drawn to the ship's library, a cozy, circular room with a grassy floor and an aquarium for a wall. It was Robin who had called the meeting. She stood before a large table where she had carefully laid out rubbings taken from the stone tablets in the island's ruins. "The creature we faced was a predator of the spirit," she began, her voice low and steady, commanding the attention of the entire room. "The ancient texts of Chromia called it a husk, a lesser servant of a greater entity they named the Silent Star. This entity is drawn to what the texts call a world wound, or a scar. The dimensional rift you created, Naruto-san, fits that description perfectly." Naruto, leaning against the curved wall, felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. He was the cause. It was a burden he was used to carrying, but it never got any lighter. "So this Silent Star thing is gonna send more of those gray, depressing jerks after us?" Luffy asked, picking his nose with a distinct lack of concern. "We'll just beat them all up." "It may not be that simple, Luffy-san," Robin countered gently. "Your attacks, and even Zoro-san's, were ineffective. It was only Naruto-san's unique energy that could destroy it. The texts described it as the vibrant pulse of life itself. It suggests a fundamental weakness to what he calls nature energy." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crew. The tablets were fragmented, but they hinted that the people of Chromia were not the first to encounter these beings. The carvings spoke of an island of warrior women to the south, whose inner sight could perceive the emptiness long before it arrived. "Inner sight?" Nami questioned, her brow furrowed in thought. "You mean observation haki?" "Precisely," Robin confirmed. "A tribe of warriors, isolated for centuries, all of whom are powerful haki users. There is only one place in the grand line that fits such a description: Amazon Lily, the island of the Kuja." The name fell into the room like a stone. Sanji immediately went into a love-struck spiral, his body twisting like a noodle as he cooed about an island of beautiful women. Frankie struck a pose, declaring the idea to be super adventurous. Zoro just grunted, recognizing the strategic gravity of the situation. Luffy's eyes lit up. "Oh, Amazon Lily. That's where Hancock is. I haven't seen her in ages." Nami shot him a sharp look. "Luffy, you can't be serious. That place is forbidden to men. The only reason you got out of there alive was a fluke. We can't just sail up and knock on the door, especially not with a whole crew of men." "But Robin said they might have information." "Information on how to fight these things," Luffy retorted, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a rare flash of captainly seriousness. "If this is Naruto's fault, That means he's our nakama now, so it's our problem too. We have to go. The logic, in its own simple way, was irrefutable. Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest at the declaration. He's our nakama now. It was said so easily, so unconditionally. He pushed himself off the wall. Your captain is right. This is my responsibility. I brought this danger here, so I should be the one to face them. He looked at the crew, his blue eyes clear and decisive. I will go to Amazon Lily. Alone. I will go as a diplomat, not an invader. I will ask for their help. Alone. Usopp shrieked. Are you crazy? They'll kill you on sight. They hate men. They respect strength. Zoro interjected. His gaze fixed on Naruto. If he approaches them with the right attitude, it might work. It's a massive risk, but it's a better plan than sailing the whole crew into a hornet's nest. And so, a tense plan was formed. The Thousand Sunny would anchor a safe distance from the island, hidden in a cove. Naruto, using a small, single-person skiff, would approach the island alone. He left a single shadow clone hidden on the Sunny, a silent, living link to his friends should things go wrong. As he rowed away from the cheerful, lion-headed ship, the imposing, jungle-covered mountains of Amazon Lily loomed before him. A fortress of stone and suspicion. He felt the gazes of the Kuja warriors on him long before he could see them, sharp, piercing probes of haki that scanned him from the shore. They were assessing him, judging him. He did not flinch. He simply kept rowing, his expression calm, his posture open and non-threatening. He landed on a white sandy beach and pulled the skiff ashore. Within seconds, he was surrounded. Dozens of women, clad in revealing warrior attire and armed with bows and snake-headed spears, emerged from the jungle. Their faces were hard, their stances ready for battle. No man may set foot on Amazon Lily and live, their leader, a tall woman with a stern face, declared. State your name and purpose, so we may carve it on your gravestone. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. He replied, his voice even and respectful, carrying easily over the sound of the waves. I have not come to fight. I have come to speak with your empress, Boa Hancock. I seek knowledge that only the Kuja may possess. It is a matter of life and death, not just for me, but for many. His calm demeanor and the sheer, palpable power that rolled off him in gentle waves gave the warriors pause. He wasn't leering or aggressive. He stood before them like a visiting dignitary, not a pirate. After a tense, silent exchange, the leader nodded curtly. The Empress will see you. She will enjoy watching you die. They led him through the dense jungle and into the massive city carved from the heart of a mountain. He walked through the streets, enduring the hateful, curious stares of thousands of women. He saw no fear in their eyes, only a fierce, territorial pride. He respected that. Finally, they entered a colossal arena, the ground a flat expanse of packed earth, the Saint. Ands filled with every citizen of the island. On a high throne carved to look like a coiled serpent sat the most beautiful woman Naruto had ever seen. She was impossibly tall and slender, with long, straight black hair and eyes the color of the deep sea. She wore elegant, flowing robes that did little to conceal her perfect figure. A large, white snake with red markings was coiled lazily at her side. She looked down at him. Her expression one of utter boredom and disdain, tilting her head back so far it seemed her neck would snap. So, Boa Hancock's voice echoed through the arena, smooth as silk and cold as ice. This is the male filth that dared to defile my island with his presence. You are braver than you are intelligent. A fatal combination. She looked him up and down, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Still, I am a merciful empress. I will grant you a quick, beautiful death. Look upon me and know the folly of your intrusion. She stood, placing her hands on her hips in a practiced, alluring pose. She winked, and a small, pink heart floated from her eye. Marrow mellow. A wave of pink, heart-shaped energy washed over the arena. Naruto watched it approach, sage-enhanced senses dissecting it instantly. It wasn't a projectile of pure force like a Rasengan, nor was it a physical attack. It was a wave of intrusive energy designed to overwrite the victim's will. A powerful mental suggestion technique. It was, in essence, a high-level, wide-area genjutsu powered by a strange, foreign energy. The Kuja warriors in the stand swooned, their cheeks flushing, as they sighed dreamily at the sight of their empress. The wave washed over Naruto, passing through him. And he just stood there. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture of pure, analytical curiosity. His expression didn't change. There were no hearts in his eyes, no flush on his cheeks. He wasn't stumbling in a daze, nor was he looking away in fear. He was simply observing. He met her gaze directly, his own blue eyes sharp and clear. Analyzing her as a warrior would analyze an opponent's technique. The arena fell silent. The Kuja warriors stared, their mouths agape. Hancock's confident, arrogant smirk faltered, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "What?" she stammered, her composure cracking for the first time. "Why are you not turning to stone? Can you not see my beauty? Are your eyes made of mud?" She was genuinely offended, her mind unable to comprehend this outcome. Only two types of men had ever resisted her power. Those of pure heart who held no lust for her, like Vice Demiral Momonga who had to stab his own hand to distract himself, or complete fools like Straw Hat Luffy who were simply too stupid to be charmed. This man was neither. He was looking right at her, strange golden pigment now framing his eyes, and he seemed utterly, completely, unimpressed. "Your technique is impressive," Naruto said, his voice calm and respectful, breaking the silence. A mental interference ability that uses the target's own impure thoughts to petrify them. A fascinating power. Hancock was speechless. He hadn't just resisted it, he had analyzed it. "Answer me, man," she shrieked, her fury mounting to hide her confusion. "Why did it not work?" Naruto's expression was open and honest, with no hint of insult. "Because I did not come here to admire your beauty, Empress. I came to speak with you as one leader to another. When I look at you, I see a powerful warrior who commands the loyalty of a nation of powerful warriors. I see the strength in your eyes and the weight of the crown you wear. Your physical appearance is irrelevant to my purpose here." His words struck Hancock harder than any physical blow ever could. Irrelevant. Men had killed and died for her beauty. They had offered her the world. They had turned to stone in droves. No one, in her entire life, had ever dismissed it as irrelevant. But he hadn't said it with malice or insult. He had said it as a statement of fact, while simultaneously acknowledging her as a ruler and a fighter. It was the most backhanded, and yet most profound, compliment she had ever received. It left her utterly disarmed. She sank back onto her throne, a storm of conflicting emotions warring within her. Who was this man? Naruto took the opportunity to press his case. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. "Empress Hancock, I am here on a diplomatic mission. A creature that consumes the spirit has appeared in these seas. It is the servant of a much greater threat. My companions and I have reason to believe the Kuja, with your long history and mastery of Haki, may have records or legends of this entity. I have come to humbly request access to your historical archives. I am asking for your help." Hancock stared at him, her mind reeling. He was strong enough to resist her power, respectful enough to call her empress, and bold enough to ask for a favor instead of begging for his life. Her curiosity was now a raging fire. But her pride, the immense, towering pride of the pirate empress, would not allow her to simply acquiesce. "You have proven immune to my charms," she said, her voice regaining some of its imperious tone. "But that does not prove your worth. Words are wind. If you want my help, you must prove your strength in combat." She pointed a long, elegant finger at him. "You will face my sisters, the Gorgon sisters, Boa Sandersonia and Boa Marigold. If you can defeat them, I will consider your request. If you lose, your skeleton will adorn my palace walls." A wave of excitement rippled through the crowd. The Gorgon sisters were the strongest warriors on the island after Hancock herself. Two women, larger and more muscular than Hancock, leapt down into the arena. One was tall and slender, the other shorter and wider. Both had wicked grins on their faces. "It has been a long time since we got to play with a man, sister," Sandersonia hissed. "Let us show him the true strength of the Kuja," Marigold rumbled. Naruto simply nodded, settling into a loose, ready stance. "I accept your terms." The battle began in a flash. The sisters were a whirlwind of coordinated attacks. Sandersonia, lithe and fast, used her snake-like agility and observation haki to predict his movements, her hair morphing into snakes that spat venom. Marigold, a bastion of power, used her armament haki to turn her body into an iron defense. Breathing fire and swinging a massive polearm. But they were fighting a ghost. Naruto was a blur of orange and black. He flowed around their attacks, dodging, weaving, parrying with the back of his hand. He never stayed in one place for more than a second. To the thousands of watching Kuja, it was a beautiful, deadly dance. He wasn't just reacting, he was a step ahead. His own sage-enhanced senses predicting their predictions. He created a dozen shadow clones. The arena was suddenly filled with orange blurs, overwhelming the sisters' senses. While they were busy fighting off the clones, the real Naruto was analyzing their every move. The tall one uses her haki to read intent, but she relies on it too much. Create a feint she can't ignore, he thought. The big one's defense is strong, but she's slow to pivot. Attack from behind. He moved. A clone faked a high-powered attack at Sandersonia. As her haki screamed at her to dodge left, the real Naruto appeared on her right, tapping her lightly on the temple with 2 fingers. The sage-enhanced blow was precise, jarring her senses and sending her stumbling. At the same time, another clone drew Marigold's attention before dissipating. And Naruto appeared behind her, sweeping her legs out from under her with enough force to crack the packed earth. The entire fight lasted less than a minute. It ended with both sisters on their knees. Panting and disoriented, Naruto stood before them, a small, blue sphere of spiraling chakra, a Rasengan, humming in his palm. It radiated a contained, terrifying power had made every haki user in the arena flinch. He could have ended them. He could have obliterated them. Instead, he let the Rasengan dissipate into nothing. He offered a hand to Sandersonia. You are both incredible warriors. It was an honor to face you. The act of mercy was more shocking than his victory. In the brutal world of the Kuja and pirates, strength was used to dominate and destroy. T.S. man wielded a power that could rival their empress, yet he had used it with surgical precision and ended the fight with an act of sportsmanship. The arena was dead silent. Every eye was on Hancock. She sat on her throne, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrests. She had watched every second of the fight, her initial arrogance melting away into stunned awe. She had seen strength in Luffy, a wild, untamable force of nature. But this was different. This was the strength of a master, a warrior who possessed absolute power and even more absolute control. He wasn't a storm. He was the calm eye at its center. And he had shown mercy to her family. Slowly, she stood up. Her expression was no longer bored or arrogant. It was a complex mask of intrigue, respect, and a nascent emotion she dared not put a name to. Your request is granted, she announced, her voice resonating with regal authority. You and your companions may have temporary access to our libraries and the hospitality of my island. Do not make me regret this decision. Naruto smiled, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to light up his face. Thank you, Empress. You will not. He bowed once more and turned to leave the arena. The crowd of Kuja warriors parting before him with a newfound respect. As he reached the exit, Hancock's voice called out, sharp and clear. Wait. He stopped and turned back to face her. She stood on the edge of her dais. A goddess looking down at a mortal, but her eyes held an uncharacteristic uncertainty. The pirate empress, for once in her life, seemed at a loss for words. Your name, she said, her voice softer now. More a question than a demand. It's Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. He gave her a small, confident nod, then turned and walked away, leaving the most beautiful woman in the world staring after him. Her heart pounding in her chest for reasons she could no longer comprehend. The serpent had met the maelstrom, and for the first time, felt its own gaze falter. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Void. The hospitality of the Kuja was a strange and overwhelming thing. For Sanji, it was a paradise of beautiful women that he could see but not approach, a constant, tortuous dance between ecstasy and despair. For Luffy, it was a grand adventure. He spent his days eating their strange jungle cuisine and challenging Kuja warriors to wrestling matches, his rubbery immunit. Wide a blunt force making him an endlessly frustrating and amusing opponent. Zoro found a grudging respect for their haki-infused fighting style and spent his time in fierce, silent training bouts that earned him the island's respect. The rest of the crew explored the city, always under the watchful escort of Kuja guards. But for Naruto, Robin, and an increasingly present Boa Hancock, the heart of a Mazan Lily was a place few of her own people had ever seen, the Kuja Archives, a deep, silent cavern behind the throne room. It was not a library of books. History here was not written on paper, but woven into immense, intricate tapestries that covered the cavern walls, their threads dyed with indestructible pigments made from the island's rarest flowers. Others were carved into massive, polished slabs of sea stone, the records of generations kept safe from the ravages of time. Hancock, initially aloof, found her curiosity winning over her pride. She would stand with her arms crossed, observant. As Robin gently translated the ancient texts carved on the stones, her fingers tracing the faded characters. She watched Naruto as he used his clones to carefully scan a dozen tapestries at once, absorbing their stories with an inhuman efficiency. He wasn't the boorish, simple-minded pirate she had come to expect of all men. He was focused, intelligent, and treated her people's history with a quiet reverence that she found disarming. "Here," Robin said, her voice hushed with discovery. She pointed to a section of a dark, star-flecked tapestry that depicted a sky filled with weeping stars. Quote, "The patterns in the weaving match the script on the Chromia tablets. It speaks of the hollow sky, an age of despair when a great silence fell upon the world. It says the silence was heralded by its whispers, formless hunters that stole the breath from the soul." Whispers, Naruto murmured, the name sending a chill down his spine. That's what the creature on Chromia felt like. A whisper of a much bigger threat. Hancock stepped forward, her long black hair shimmering in the dim light of the glowing moss that illuminated the cavern. "Our oral traditions speak of this time," she said, her voice unexpectedly soft. "It is a story told to scare children, a warning against looking into the emptiness between stars. It says the hollow sky was driven away by a warrior who carried the sun in his hands." She looked at Naruto, at the golden energy that still faintly clung to his presence. The implication was clear. Their research was forging a new dynamic between the three of them. It was a partnership born of necessity, an alliance built over ancient legends and the shared understanding of a looming threat. Hancock, for the first time, was seeing Naruto not as a male intruder, but as a vital ally. A warrior whose power might be the key to her people's survival. It was in the middle of one of these quiet, studious afternoons that the world went silent. It wasn't a gradual fading. It was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, the cavern was filled with the gentle echo of their voices and the distant sounds of the Kuja city. The next, there was nothing. The world was robbed of all sound. Naruto saw Robin's mouth move, but no words came out. He slapped his hands against his ears, but there was no ringing, no pressure, just a profound, dead emptiness. Panic flared in his chest. He looked to Hancock. Her eyes were wide with shock, but then they narrowed. As a master of observation hockey, she felt it on a deeper level. It was not just the absence of sound, it was the absence of presence. A hole had been torn in the fabric of the world, a sucking void that was swallowing the very essence of life on her island. The three of them ran from the cavern, bursting into the throne room, and then out into the main courtyard of the city. The scene was one of surreal, silent chaos. Kuja warriors were shouting, their faces contorted in alarm, but their cries were stillborn. Children were weeping silent tears. The vibrant jungle that ringed the city was losing its color, the lush greens and brilliant florals fading to a dull, monochromatic gray. And in the center of the sky above the arena, it floated. It was humanoid, but only in the loosest sense. Its form was carved from something that looked like polished obsidian, impossibly black, reflecting no light. It was tall and unnervingly elegant, with long limbs and a featureless, smooth ovoid for a head. It wore its silence like a cloak, a tangible field of absolute nullification that radiated outwards for a mile in every direction. This was no mere husk or whisper. This was a harbinger. This was a lieutenant of the void. Hancock's sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, were already in the arena, rallying the Kuja elite guard. Aim for the sky. Hockey-infused arrows. Fire. Sandersonia's silent command was conveyed through hand signals, the warriors responding with practiced discipline. 1,000 arrows soared into the air, their tips glowing with the dark, metallic sheen of armament hockey. They were projectiles that could shatter stone and pierce steel. As they entered the creature's field of silence, they sizzled. The haki that coated them dissolving like sugar in water. The arrows that reached the creature bounced harmlessly off its obsidian skin. Hancock's face was pale. Their greatest weapon, the haki that defined their tribe, was being suppressed, dampened to the point of uselessness. Perfume femur, she silently roared, leaping into the air and delivering a devastating axe kick. Her haki-coated leg, strong enough to shatter a pacifista, slammed into the creature's chest. There was a dull, soundless impact, but the creature barely moved. It was like kicking a mountain. It raised a long, slender arm. The air in front of its palm shimmered, and a beam of pure, black emptiness shot towards Hancock. It was an attack of anti-energy, a projectile of pure nullification. Naruto moved without thinking. He appeared in front of Hancock in a flash of gold, a massive, clawed arm of Kurama's chakra materializing to intercept the beam. The golden energy sizzled and evaporated where the blackness touched it, a chunk of the ethereal limb simply ceasing to exist. The force of the impact sent him skidding back, his sandals carving deep trenches in the arena floor. He had blocked it, but it had cost him a significant amount of chakra. He glanced back at Hancock. "Are you okay?" His voice was a thought, a feeling, rather than a sound, but she understood. She stared at him, at the dissipating golden arm, her shock momentarily overriding her pride. He had shielded her. By now, the rest of the Straw Hats had arrived, their faces grim. Luffy, his fists already black with haki, stretched his arm back. Gomu Gomu no, elephant gun. His colossal fist slammed into the creature, and this time, it was driven back. Physical force, it seemed, still had some effect, even if it was diminished. Zoro followed up with his own attack. Santoryu Ogi, Ichidai Sanzen Daisen Sakai, but the cuts his blades left on the creature's obsidian skin sealed themselves almost instantly. They were in a desperate fight. Ogi, NST, an enemy they couldn't properly hear, whose abilities countered their greatest strengths. They could damage it, but it regenerated. It was a battle of attrition they could not win, especially as The life-draining effect of its presence grew stronger with every passing moment. High on a cliff overlooking the city, Nami watched the silent battle unfold, her knuckles white on her updated Klima tact. She couldn't fight it head-on. But her mind was racing, analyzing the situation like a complex weather pattern. The silence wasn't natural, it was a field, an area of effect. And like any energy field, it could be disrupted. "Okay, you creepy silent freak," she muttered to herself, her voice lost to the void. "Let's see how you like a little noise." She began to spin her staff, gathering clouds. Not just normal storm clouds, but massive, dense thunderheads crackling with unstable energy. The sky above Amazon Lily darkened ominously. Down in the arena, the battle was turning against them. The Harbinger, who Robin had mentally named Tacitus, after the silent Roman historian, was adapting. It moved with a fluid, teleporting grace, its attacks of void energy becoming faster and harder to predict. Robin, using her devil fruit to sprout eyes on the arena walls, was the only one who could track its movements consistently. It solidifies for 1.5 seconds after it teleports. She projected into her comrades' minds using a crude form of mental communication born of desperation and the faint echoes of their bonds. "Aim for the chest. There's a flicker of energy there." Just as she sent the thought, Tacitus appeared behind Marigold. Before anyone could react, Nami unleashed her attack. Thunder tempo. It wasn't a single lightning bolt. It was a storm. A dozen forks of brilliant, white, hot lightning slammed into the mountains around the arena. The sheer, overwhelming discharge of atmospheric electricity washed through the battlefield. The silent field flickered violently. For a single, glorious second, sound returned to the world in a deafening roar of thunder. In that second, the Kuja's haki flared back to life. "Now," Hancock screamed, her voice finally audible. Guided by Robin's intelligence, she and Naruto moved as one. It was no longer a clumsy effort of two powerful individuals. It was a dance. Hancock unleashed a barrage of slave arrows. Tacitus, its regeneration momentarily slowed by the electrical surge, was struck by several. While it was distracted, Naruto's clones, hundreds of them, swarmed it from all sides. It retaliated, swatting them away, but it was a feint. The real Naruto appeared above it, a Rasengan in his hand, while Hancock appeared below it, her leg cocked for a powerful kick. They struck at the exact same moment. The combined impact shattered a piece of the creature's obsidian chest, revealing a swirling core of violet energy. It let out its first and only sound, a high-pitched, psychic shriek of pain that echoed in all of their minds. But it wasn't defeated. The hole in its chest began to regenerate, and the draining aura intensified tenfold. The entire jungle of Amazon lily began to turn gray, its life force being drawn into the harbinger to fuel its repairs. Naruto felt the life energy of the world screaming in agony. This was it, the final move. He knew what he had to do. Everyone, get back. His voice boomed, amplified by his own chakra. He flared his power. The golden cloak of the Six Paths Sage Mode erupted around him, a pillar of pure, life-giving energy that pushed back the silence and the decay, creating a small sanctuary of sound and color in the gray, dying world. He rose into the air, a sun in the heart of a void. He held out his hand, and a recentrican began to form. But it didn't stop. It grew, fed by the immense power of the Sage of Six Paths and Kurama's limitless chakra. It swelled to the size of a small meteor, a miniature star of swirling wind and divine energy, its core a vortex of such gravitat. Ional force that it bent the light around it. The sound it produced was the scream of a universe being born. Nami, Robin, and Hancock could only stare up in utter awe and terror. This was the power he had unleashed on the Marine fleet. But magnified, concentrated. This was the power of a god. They saw the desperation in his eyes, the grim resolve of a boy who had fought world-ending battles before. This was his reality, and they were only now beginning to comprehend its terrible scale. Six Paths. Ultra Big Ball Recentrican. He didn't just throw it. He slammed it down onto the harbinger. The world turned white. All thought, all feeling, was consumed by a silent, overwhelming explosion of pure energy. When their vision returned, Tacitus was gone. Not just defeated, but erased from existence. The silence was broken, and the colors bled back into the world, the jungle of Amazon lily returning to its vibrant green in a rush of life. The battle was over. They had won. But as the golden cloak of power faded from Naruto, he stumbled, clutching his head. He fell to his knees, his face a mask of horror. The harbinger's last act was not one of defiance. It was a message, a whisper planted directly into the mind of its destroyer. It was a voice, cold and ancient and vast as the space between galaxies, and it said, "The beacon is lit, the trail has been marked. The sovereign sees this world through your eyes, little echo. It is a vibrant world, a sweet meal. All will become nothing, all will become void." He looked up, his eyes finding Nami, then Robin, then Hancock as they rushed to his side. They saw the raw, undiluted terror in his gaze. The god of the battlefield was gone, replaced by a young man who had just been told that he had unwittingly served as the dinner bell for a cosmic horror. And the main course was his new home and everyone in it. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Weight of a Promise. The victory feast in the grand hall of the Kuja Palace was a raucous affair. The warrior women of Amazon Lily, who had stared death in its silent face, now celebrated life with fierce, unbridled joy. They drank, sang, and feasted, their laughter echoing through the mountain city. A defiant roar against the emptiness that had threatened to consume them. The straw hats, swept up in the jubilant atmosphere, celebrated in their own unique ways. Luffy was engaged in an eating contest with a dozen Kuja warriors, his rubber stomach giving him a distinct advantage. Sanji wept tears of joy as he was permitted to help in the palace kitchens. Zoro sat with Elder Nyan, the two of them sharing a bottle of potent snake wine in a contest of silent, grim-faced endurance. But at the head table, seated on a smaller, yet still elegant, throne beside Empress Hancock, Naruto was a storm cloud in a room full of sunshine. He barely touched his food. He stared into the flickering torchlight, his mind a turbulent sea of chilling, psychic whispers. "The sovereign sees this world through your eyes, little echo." The words were a brand on his soul. He was not a savior. He was a Judas goat, leading a cosmic slaughterer to a fresh, unsuspecting pasture. Every cheer, every laugh, every moment of life and joy in the hall felt like a personal accusation. This vibrant world, so full of energy and wonder, was going to be consumed. And it was his fault. Hancock watched him, her usual arrogance replaced by a sharp, perceptive concern. She saw the deep, haunted look in his eyes, the same look she sometimes saw in the mirror when she remembered her time as a slave to the celestial dragons. It was the look of someone carrying an invisible, crushing weight. Later that night, the senior members of the Straw Hat crew, along with Hancock and her sisters, gathered in a private council chamber. The celebratory mood had evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of their situation. Naruto, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, relayed the Harbinger's final message in its entirety. He told them about the beacon. He told them about the sovereign. He told them that his very presence in their world was the lighthouse guiding the all-consuming storm to their shores. When he finished, a heavy silence filled the room. The implications were staggering, almost too vast to comprehend. So, this thing, this void sovereign, Nami began, her voice trembling slightly. It's coming here because of you. Naruto didn't flinch from the bald truth. He simply nodded. Yes, this is super bad, Frankie stated, his usual flamboyance gone. The question is not whether it is bad, but what we are to do about it, Robin said. Her gaze analytical and fixed on Naruto. She could see the conclusion he had already reached, the self-destructive path he was paving in his own mind. Luffy, for his part, was uncharacteristically quiet, his straw hat shadowing his eyes. He listened to every word, his usual simple-mindedness giving way to the innate, sharp instinct of a great captain. The meeting concluded with no clear plan, only the heavy, shared knowledge of their impending doom. The crew dispersed, each lost in their own thoughts. Naruto retreated to the quiet solitude of the Kuja archives, telling everyone he was going to search for more clues. But his true purpose was different. He was looking for an escape route. He was planning his desertion. His mind was a prison of familiar logic. He was a shinobi. A shinobi endures. A shinobi makes the hard choices for the sake of the mission, for the greater good. Jiraiya had died to get information. Nagato had died to resurrect the village. His own Ather had died to seal Kurama within him. His entire life was built on a foundation of noble sacrifice. It was his turn to shoulder the burden. He would leave. He would find a way to get as far from this world as possible. Or draw the sovereign into a dead, empty part of the cosmos and fight it alone. It was the only way. The only logical, responsible, heroic thing to do. He was so lost in his grim calculations, tracing potential escape routes on a map of the Grand Line, that he didn't hear her approach. Running away is not a strategy. It is a slow form of suicide. Naruto looked up. Nico Robin was standing at the entrance to the cavern, her arms crossed, her expression one of serene, knowing sadness. She had not come to stop him. She had come to understand him. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice harsher than he intended as he rolled up the map. I'm the danger. If I'm gone, the danger is gone. It's simple, is it? She walked further into the cavern, her footsteps silent. She ran a hand over one of the ancient stone tablets. For 20 years, I ran. After the world government destroyed my home, Ohara, I was the sole survivor. They put a bounty on my head when I was 8 years old. They called me the demon child. Naruto's defensive posture faltered. He listened, captivated by the quiet pain in her voice. I spent 2 decades believing that my very existence was a sin. She continued, not looking at him, but at the histories carved in stone. I believed that anyone who showed me kindness would be destroyed because of me. So I ran. I betrayed people before they could betray me. I used them and left them. I built walls of solitude around myself, thinking I was protecting them. But I wasn't. I was just ensuring my own misery. Isolation is a cage, Naruto-san, not a shield. She finally turned to face him, her dark eyes filled with a profound empathy that cut through his shinobi logic. I know the weight you carry. I know what it feels like to believe you were a curse upon the world. But I also know that I did not truly start living until I stopped running. I started living when I found people who refused to let me run. People who stood with me and declared that my life was worth fighting for. Her words struck a chord deep within him, shaking the foundations of his resolve. She wasn't lecturing him. She was showing him a mirror of his own soul. He had no answer for her. He was still reeling from her quiet wisdom when he made his way towards the hidden cove where his skiff was moored. The moon was high, casting a silver sheen on the jungle canopy. He had to go. Robin's words had touched him, but they hadn't changed the fundamental equation. He was the beacon. He was halfway to the shore when a figure stepped out from behind a massive banyan tree. Blocking his path, it was Nami. Her arms were crossed, her face was shadowed, and she was tapping her foot with an angry, impatient rhythm. "And just where do you think you're going?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Nami, get out of my way," he said, trying to push past her. "No, this isn't a discussion. I'm leaving. It's for the best." That's when the calm broke. Her hand shot out and grabbed his arm. Her grip surprisingly strong. "For the best? For whose best, you absolute idiot?" she yelled, her voice cracking with a mixture of fury and fear. "Did you not hear a word anyone said? Did you not see what we did today? We fought that thing together. We won, together, and now a bigger one is coming because of me." He shot back, his own frustration boiling over. "I can't let it destroy you all. I won't." Tears of pure, undiluted rage streamed down her face. She punched him hard in the chest, a blow that had no force behind it but carried the weight of a cannonball. "Stop it. Just stop acting like you're the only one who gets to make sacrifices. Do you think we're that weak? Do you think our lives are so meaningless that you can just throw yours away to protect us without even asking?" She jabbed a finger into his chest. "When Luffy saved my village, he didn't do it by himself and then sail away. He fought with us, for us. When we went to war with the world to save Robin, we did it together. That's what it means to be Nakama. It means you don't get to run off and die by yourself, you selfish moron. We share the burden, we fight together, and if we have to, we die together. That is the promise. Don't you dare try to break it." Her words were like a physical assault, battering down the walls of his logic, his duty, his ingrained self-sacrifice. She wasn't appealing to his mind. She was screaming at his heart, reminding him of the very bonds he had fought his entire life to protect. His resolve crumbled, replaced by a wave of confusion and pain. As they stood there, locked in a tearful, furious stalemate under the moonlight, the jungle lit up. Torches. A column of Kuja warriors, fully armed, marched into the clearing. At their head was Boa Hancock. Her expression as cold and hard as marble. "He is right about one thing," Hancock said, her voice cutting through the emotionally charged air. "This discussion is over." Naruto's heart sank. He thought she was here to sanction his departure, to cast the dangerous man from her island. But he was wrong. She walked past Nami and stood directly in front of him, so close he could see the defiant fire in her eyes. She did not plead. She did not argue. She commanded. "You seem to be under the impression that you have a choice in this matter," she stated, her voice resonating with the absolute authority of an empress. "You are the sworn ally of the Kuja. Your fate is now tied to the fate of my nation. I do not make alliances that are so easily discarded." She turned to one of her guards. "Bring me the broadcast Den Den Mushi. Now." A large, snail-like creature with communication equipment strapped to its shell was brought forward. Hancock took the receiver, her gaze never leaving Naruto's. "I was once a warlord of the sea," she declared, her voice rising, intended not just for him, but for the heavens themselves. "The world government may have disbanded the system, but my name still carries weight. They will be listening. The entire world will be listening." She held the receiver to her lips, her voice booming with regal power. "Let all who sail these seas hear the words of Boa Hancock, Pirate Empress of the Kuja. The man known as Uzumaki Naruto stands under my personal protection. He is a hero to my people and a sworn brother to my nation. From this day forward, his enemies are the enemies of Amazon Lily. His fight is our fight. Let the Marines, the Yonko, and any self-proclaimed gods hiding in the void hear this. If you wish to harm this man, your path will be through the shields and spears of every last Kuja warrior. We will share his fate, whatever it may be. This, I swear on my honor as Empress." She slammed the receiver down. The broadcast was sent. It was a declaration of war against the unknown, a line drawn in the sand of the entire world. It was an absolute, unbreakable, political cage of loyalty. He couldn't run now. To do so would be to dishonor her, to invalidate her vow, to make her and her entire nation a liar's laughingstock. It was the most terrifying, most touching, most utterly binding act of friendship he had ever witnessed. He looked from Hancock's fierce, defiant face, to Nami's tear-streaked, angry one, to the memory of Robin's wise, empathetic eyes. Emotion, logic, power, they had formed an unbreakable three-pronged NSE around his own self-destructive heroism. The weight on his shoulders didn't disappear. But for the first time, he realized he wasn't carrying it alone. The dam of his control, the shinobi discipline, nay that had held him together for so long, finally broke. A choked sob escaped his lips. The hero of the fourth great ninja war, the man who had battled a goddess, crumpled. He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands as the full, terrifying weight of his fear, his guilt, and his overwhelming gratitude washed over him. He wasn't just crying for the danger he was in. He was crying for the simple, profound fact that these people, these strangers from another world, refused to let him face it by himself. Meanwhile, in the hallowed, silent chambers atop the Red Line, in the Pangea castle of Mary Geoise, the five elders known as the Gorosei stood before a massive map of the world. The report lay on the table before them. It detailed a cataclysmic energy event originating from the Calm Belt, from the island of Amazon Lily. The readings were unlike anything their scientists had ever seen. It dwarfed the output of an ancient weapon. It was wild, untraceable, and utterly terrifying. Then, the second report came in. The brazen, worldwide broadcast from the former warlord, Boa Hancock. The long-haired elder with the massive sword traced a finger over the location of Amazon Lily. This, Uzumaki Naruto. His appearance coincides with the emergence of these voids. The energy signature confirms he is the source of the anomaly. He is an unknown on the board, the bald, scar-faced elder said, his voice a low growl. An element of chaos we cannot predict or control. And he now has the open allegiance of the Kuja. Hancock has made a foolish, emotional decision, another elder mused. But it has forced our hand. We cannot allow a weapon of this magnitude to remain in the hands of pirates. Nor can we risk him attracting more of these entities. A consensus was reached, a silent, grim understanding passing between the five men who secretly ruled the world. The tallest, blonde elder looked up, his gaze distant, as if he were speaking to someone in the room they could not see. The risk to the balance of the world is too great. This individual must be contained. Send Cipher Pol Igus 0. Their commander knows the protocols for handling threats beyond the common understanding. He paused, his voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. Capture the anomaly. If capture proves impossible, erase him. And everyone associated with him. In a darkened room deep within the castle, a figure knelt. They were clad in the stark white of CP0, but their uniform was adorned with subtle, dark gray markings. Their face was hidden behind a smooth, white mask, featureless save for a single, stylized, crimson teardrop under the right eye. The elder's voice echoed in the room from a hidden speaker. The masked figure simply bowed their head in acknowledgement. They rose without a sound, a phantom of absolute loyalty and lethal purpose, and melted back into the shadows from whence they came. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Dance of Blades and Shadows. In the week that followed Hancock's declaration, a new rhythm took hold of Amazon Lily. The initial shock among the Kuja warriors at having men on their island had morphed into a grudging, then a genuine, respect. The Straw Hats were not like the brutish pirates and marines of the outside world. They were strange, chaotic, but they possessed an unbreakable loyalty that the Kuja, a tribe of sisters, could understand on a fundamental level. The alliance was no longer just a political statement, it was becoming a functioning military reality. Naruto, having finally accepted that he was not in this fight alone, threw himself into the role of a strategist. He spent his days in the arena, not just training, but innovating. He ran drills, combining his shadow clones with the Kuja's hockey-laced archery, creating formations that could unleash 1,000 serpent arrows from 100 different angles at once. His coordination with Nami, Robin, and Hancock became a daily exercise in synergy. Nami would stand on a platform, using her Cleam attack to create shifting weather patterns over the training grounds. Thick fog in Sector Gamma. She'd shout, and 100 of Naruto's clones, led by Hancock, would have to navigate by sound and hockey alone, learning to fight as a cohesive unit in zero visibility. Robin, meanwhile, would act as an intelligence officer, using clones of her own to spot weaknesses in their formations. Her calm voice calling out corrections that tightened their defenses. It was during one such training session, under a sky Nami had filled with artificial storm clouds, that the real storm arrived. It came not with thunder, but with silence. Elder Nyan was the first to sense it. The old woman, who was watching the training with a critical eye, suddenly froze, her gaze snapping towards the cliffs that ringed the city. A presence? No, an absence. Several of them. They're already inside the walls. Before a general alarm could be sounded, the attack began. It was not a frontal assault. It was a decapitation strike. From the shadows of the ornate palace rooftops, a dozen figures clad in stark white dropped into the city. They moved with the silent, fluid grace of Rokushiki masters, their speed blurring them into near invisibility. These were the elite assassins of the world government, Cipher Pol Igus Zero. Chaos erupted. One agent, using Shigen, fired pinpoint air bullets that took out Kuja sentries before they could raise their horns. Another used Geppo to walk on the air, bypassing ground defenses to strike at the palace itself. They were a whirlwind of disciplined, lethal force. Their objective clear: create maximum disruption and isolate their true target. Thereafter Naruto, Robin yelled, her face grim as she saw two agents moving directly towards the arena. Naruto's reaction was instantaneous. The time for training was over. Multi-shadow clone jutsu, he roared. With an explosive cloud of smoke that filled the entire arena, 2,000 identical Narutos appeared. Each one battle-ready. The sheer, sudden number of targets brought the CP0 agents to a momentary halt, their cold professionalism momentarily shaken. But Naruto knew a simple swarm wouldn't be enough. These were not mindless marines. They were the best of the best. He needed a brain, not just brawn. Hancock, he yelled, his voice cutting through the rising din of battle. You have the main force. Take 500 clones and the palace guard. Your objective is to contain and eliminate. Do not let them reach the civilian sectors. Hancock didn't hesitate. A fierce, predatory grin spread across her face. With pleasure, she leapt into action, her commands sharp and clear, the Kuja and clones moving as a single, powerful spearhead under her command. Robin, Nami, with me. Naruto grabbed both of them, and in a flicker of movement, shunshined them to the relative safety of the palace's highest watchtower, a circular room with a commanding view of the entire city. It was their new command center. Another 50 clones appeared in the room, some holding maps, others ready to act as runners. This is insane, Nami breathed, her heart hammering as she looked down at the sporadic, deadly skirmishes breaking out across her new battlefield. No, Naruto said, his voice calm and sharp, the voice of a commander. This is a shinobi mission. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with an absolute trust that banished her fear. Nami, you control the environment. You're not a navigator anymore, you're the weather goddess of this island. Use your storms, your fog, your mirages. I want you to turn this entire city into a death trap for them. He then turned to Robin. Robin, you're my eyes and ears. I'm sending clones to engage every single one of them. They'll be defeated, but they'll learn something first. You are to analyze their fighting styles, find their weaknesses, and relay that intel to Hancock's main force. You are the spymaster. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Robin's face. Fleur-de-lis. Campo de Ojos, she murmured, and thousands of eyes bloomed across the city's walls, trees, and rooftops, all linked to her mind. A new kind of battle began. It was not a brawl. It was a chess match played with human lives across a board a mile wide. A CP0 agent, moving in a blur of Soru, found himself suddenly running into a flash flood as Nami created a localized downpour, turning the street into a raging river that threw him off balance. Before he could recover, a dozen hockey-infused arrows from a hidden Kuja squad pierced his defenses. Another agent, whose Tekai was strong enough to shatter blades, was engaged by a squad of Naruto's clones. Robin, observing through her network of eyes, noted the way he braced himself, the slight shift in his stance. His armor is weakest at the joints during a counterattack. She relayed through a clone to Hancock. Moments later, Hancock herself appeared, her kick aimed not at the agent's chest, but at the back of his knee, crippling him instantly. From the tower, the three of them worked in perfect harmony. Naruto was the heart, pumping out clones and directives. Nami was the hands, shaping the battlefield itself. Robin was the mind, dissecting the enemy and predicting their moves. But they all knew this was just the prelude. The lesser agents were being contained, but the leader, the true threat, had yet to show himself. He appeared in the center of the now empty arena, as if stepping out of a shadow. He was tall and slender, dressed in the same immaculate white as his comrades, but his uniform bore subtle gray markings. His face was hidden by a smooth, white mask, featureless save for a crimson, teardrop-shaped mark beneath the right eye socket. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal confidence. This was the one the Gorosei had sent. This was Strix, Uzumaki Naruto. His voice was a filtered, unnervingly calm baritone that seemed to emanate from the mask itself. By order of the world government, you are to be apprehended. Resistance is unadvisable. The real Naruto appeared before him, landing softly on the arena floor. I'm not going anywhere. I suspected as much, Strix said. He made no move to attack, simply holding up a hand. Naruto didn't wait. He formed a Rasengan and charged. He was a meter from Strix when the masked man made a slight, almost lazy gesture with his fingers. Naruto's forward momentum vanished. He was suddenly flying sideways, the Rasengan plowing into the arena wall and detonating with enough force to shake the mountain. Naruto landed on his feet, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't been pushed. He had been redirected. A curious energy, Strix commented, his head tilted. Kinetic, rotational, and something else. My Akuma no Mi allows me to control the vectors of anything within my field of influence. Your attacks are meaningless. Your energy is just another force to be pointed elsewhere. In the command tower, Robin's eyes widened in horror. A vector manipulator. It's a godlike power. Any attack with direction or velocity can be turned aside. This changed everything. Naruto's speed, his Rasengan, his taijutsu, they were all useless. Strix moved. He didn't run. He simply slid across the ground, the vector of his own movement altered to grant him impossible speed. He appeared before Naruto, his hand outstretched. Naruto threw a punch, but his fist was deflected by an invisible field, the kinetic energy of his blow erupting as a shockwave behind Strix. The masked man's fingers tapped Naruto's chest. Naruto was thrown backwards as if hit by a cannonball, the redirected force of his own punch used against him. He crashed into the far wall, the stone cracking around him. This is bad, Nami breathed, watching in horror. He can't even get close. But Naruto was already formulating a plan. He couldn't win with power. He had to win with strategy. He created 1,000 clones inside the arena, a swirling maelstrom of orange and black that rushed Strix from every conceivable direction. Strix stood at the center of the storm, perfectly calm. Clones that attacked from the front were sent flying upwards. Clones from above were slammed into the ground. Every attack was effortlessly redirected. It was a beautiful, terrifying dance of absolute defense. Your numbers are also irrelevant, Strix stated, flicking a finger. And sending a dozen clones tumbling away. That's what you think, Naruto yelled. He stood amidst his clones, his hands in a seal. In the command tower, Nami saw his signal. Now, she yelled, slamming her staff down. A dense, thick fog instantly filled the arena, obscuring everything. At the same time, she created dozens of electrical mirages, false images of Naruto that flickered in and out of existence. Strix's perfect defense faltered for the first time. He could redirect what he could perceive, but his senses were being overwhelmed. A real clone would charge from his left, a mirage would flicker on his right. The fog deadened his senses, forcing him to rely on a crude form of observation hockey that was being confused by the sheer number of signatures. This was the opening. Hancock, her duty done in the city, leapt into the arena. Guided by Robin's precise instructions, she moved through the fog like a phantom. She didn't attack Strix directly. She attacked the ground at his feet. Her hockey-infused kicks shattering the stone, creating unstable footing and clouds of dust that further obscured his vision. Strix was now on the defensive, redirecting attacks from clones he could rely while simultaneously trying to keep his balance. He was being overwhelmed, his mind forced to process 1,000 different vectors at once. And that was when he made his mistake. He focused his attention on a massive Rasengan coming from a clone directly in front of him, preparing to redirect the large, obvious threat. But it was a feint. The true attack wasn't moving towards him at all. The ground beneath Strix's feet erupted. The real Naruto, who had used a transformation jutsu to become a part of the stone floor, shot upwards. Strix had no vector to redirect. Naruto wasn't an incoming projectile. He was the point of origin. Naruto grabbed the front of Strix's uniform, his other hand pressing flat against the CP0 agent's chest. There was no punch, no blast. He simply held him. Sage art. Amphibian technique. Pure, untamed nature energy, the very life force of the world, poured from Naruto's palm directly into Strix's body. It was an attack with no motion, no vector. It was a direct, internal invasion of energy. Strix's body convulsed. His devil fruit power could not redirect something that was already inside him, something that was attacking his very cells. The teared voice from his mask let out a strangled cry of pain. The vector field around him collapsed. With the shield down, Hancock delivered a single, brutal kick to the side of his head, sending him tumbling across the ground. His perfect mask cracking down the middle. They had won. But as they approached his down form, Strix's body began to shimmer. He pressed a button on his wrist, and a strange, black portal, a tear in space, opened behind him. He was being pulled into it. An emergency escape. He pushed himself up, looking at Naruto through the crack in his mask. One cold, human eye was visible. Impressive. Uzumaki Naruto. He rasped, his real voice strained. But your victory has only confirmed our fears. He gave a cold, humorless chuckle. The world government has studied the records of the Void Century. We understand more than you can possibly imagine about unusual energies from beyond the sky. You are not the first. You are simply the latest. And we will be ready next time. With that final, chilling pronouncement, the portal swallowed him, closing with a faint pop. Silence returned to the arena. The fog cleared. The battle was over. They stood victorious, the alliance of the Maelstrom, the cartographer, the archaeologist, and the Serpent Empress, forged in the crucible of a battle won not by power, but by perfect, unbreakable trust. But Strix's final words hung in the air, a promise of a colder, more intelligent war to come. They had defeated the assassins, but they had revealed their entire hand to the masters of the game. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Tides of Emotion. The escape from Amazon Lily was a somber, hurried affair. Hancock's defiant broadcast had turned her island from a fortress into a target. While a contingent of her most trusted warriors, led by her sisters, remained behind to fortify their home and prepare for a potential siege, Hancock herself, along with a small retinue and Elder Nyan, joined the Straw Hats aboard the Thousand Sunny. It was a tactical retreat, a way to draw the world government's attention away from her people. But for the Empress, leaving her throne felt like a wound. They sailed for 3 days, guided by Nami through treacherous, uncharted waters where marine patrols dared not venture. They found refuge at an island that didn't exist on any map, a ghost in the Grand Line. They named it Ethelgard, a whisper of a name for a whisper of a place. It was beautiful, but in a melancholy way. Towering, ancient trees draped in moss formed a silent canopy over hills dotted with the crumbling ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. A gentle mist perpetually clung to the forest floor, and the only sounds were the sighing of the wind and the distant crash of waves against black, volcanic cliffs. It was an island for ghosts and secrets. The perfect place to hide and heal. The crew was on edge. The victory against CP0 felt hollow, tainted by Strix's parting words. They had fought assassins, but now they faced the full, calculating intelligence of the world government itself, an enemy that knew about threats from beyond the sky. The weight of it all was beginning to press down on them, most of all on Naruto. He was quieter than ever. His moments of levity with Luffy gone, replaced by long periods of silent, intense meditation as he tried to expand his senses, to feel for the approach of the Void Sovereign. It was during one of these deep meditations, seated on a flat stone amidst the island's largest ruin, that the Sovereign finally reached back. His mind was plunged into a darkness colder and more absolute than any he had ever known. He was no longer on Ethelgard. He was standing in the middle of Ichiraku Ramen. But it was wrong. The steam from the bowls was a stagnant, gray mist. Chuki and Ayame stood behind the counter. Their faces slack, their eyes empty, dull orbs of gray. He screamed their names, but they didn't react. He ran out into the streets of Konoha. It was the same everywhere. His village, his vibrant, noisy, beloved home, was silent. The people were husks, moving with a listless, shuffling gait, their color and life leached away. He saw Iruka-sensei, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura, Sai, all of them were empty shells. He screamed, he pleaded, he shook them, but there was no recognition, no spark of life. He looked up at the Hokage monument. The stone faces of his heroes, his father, were weeping gray dust, crumbling as if from 1,000 years of decay. And above it all, the sky was not blue. It was a swirling, starless vortex of absolute black, a great, hungry mouth slowly descending to swallow the world. A voice echoed in the dead silence of his mind, the same cold, vast voice from the Harbinger, but stronger now, impossibly ancient. This is the gift of the void. The peace of nothingness. All that you fought for, all that you loved, will be granted this mercy. And you, little beacon, have shown us the way to a new world to bless. Naruto woke with a strangled gasp, his body drenched in cold sweat. The vision was gone, but the feeling of utter, soul-crushing despair remained. He was back in the ruins of Ethelgard, the gentle mist swirling around him, but he still see the gray faces of his friends, still feel the cold of the dying world on his skin. He wrapped his arms around himself, trembling uncontrollably. The weight was too much. The guilt was a physical poison, burning through his veins. The ghosts of this place are noisy, are they not? He looked up. Robin was standing a few feet away, a sad, knowing look on her face. She had a book in her hand, but it was clear she hadn't been reading. She had been watching him. It was a nightmare, he managed to say, his voice hoarse. Was it? She asked softly, sitting on a fallen pillar near him. Or was it a memory of a battle you have yet to fight? I know that feeling. After Ohara burned, I saw it in my dreams every night for years. My home, my people, turning to ash. Naruto stared at her, at this calm, brilliant woman who had lived with a world of ghosts her entire life. He found himself confessing, the words tumbling out of him, telling her about the vision, about the faces of his friends, about the voice. She listened patiently, her expression never changing. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. The sovereign is using your memories against you, she said finally. It feeds on will, on emotion. So it attacks the source of your will, your bonds to the home you lost. It wants to fill you with despair, to make you believe that all you love is destined for destruction. But it's true, Naruto whispered, the words tasting like ash. I led it here. If this world is destroyed, it will be my fault. No, she said, her voice firm, cutting through his self-pity. That is the logic of a victim. And you are not a victim. You are a survivor, just as I am. She looked him directly in the eyes. I used to believe I was a demon, a curse upon the world. The people I loved died protecting me. For years, I believed it was my fault. But I was wrong. The fault lies with those who wield destruction, not with those who inspire loyalty. Your friends and your family fought and died for a world they believed in. A world you represented. The sovereign is the destroyer. You, she gave a small, rare smile, are the reason people fight destroyers in the first place. She chewed and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You are not a beacon for destruction, Naruto-san. You are a beacon of hope. That is why the darkness fears your light. Her words were a balm on his raw soul. She hadn't offered platitudes or easy comfort. She had offered him the one thing he desperately needed, a different perspective, a new lens through which to view his own guilt. She understood the weight of his past, the burden of his power, and she was not afraid of it. In the quiet ruins, surrounded by the ghosts of a forgotten people, two lonely survivors found a moment of profound, silent communion. Later that evening, the sky fulfilled the island's misty promise and opened up. A storm rolled in from the sea, lashing the thousand sunny with wind and rain. Naruto stood on the foredeck, letting the cold spray wash over him. The physical chill a welcome distraction from the turmoil in his heart. Robin's words had helped, but the vision still haunted him. He heard footsteps on the wet deck behind him. It was Nami, her orange hair plastered to her face, a thin raincoat her only protection against the downpour. A bit rough out here, don't you think? She shouted over the howling wind. I like it, he shouted back. It's noisy. Drowns out the thoughts. She came to stand beside him at the railing, gripping it as the ship pitched on a large wave. For a while, they just stood in silence, watching the lightning flash across the dark, angry sea. I was so scared, she said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the storm. He turned to look at her. Her face was illuminated by a flash of lightning, and he saw that her eyes were glistening with more than just rain. When we fought that CP0 agent, she continued, her voice trembling, I was in the tower, watching. I saw him hit you. I saw you go flying into that wall, and for a second, I thought you were. It was the most terrified I've been since Arlong. The admission hung in the air, a raw, vulnerable confession. When I first met you, she said, looking down at her white-knuckled grip on the railing, I was terrified of your power. It was monstrous, world-breaking. I only saw you as a strategic asset, a weapon we were lucky to have on our side. But then I saw you on Chromia, saving those people. I saw you in the arena, showing mercy to Hancock's sisters. And I see you now, carrying this impossible burden and blaming yourself for it. She finally turned to face him, her green eyes boring into his. I'm not scared of your power anymore, Naruto. I'm scared for you. I'm scared of what this weight will do to you. And I hate it. I hate that you think you have to carry it by yourself. She took a hesitant step closer, her hand leaving the rail to rest on his arm. My dream is to map the world. It's this huge, impossible thing. But I know I can do it, because I have my friends. I have my crew. I'm not doing it alone. She squeezed his arm. This is your impossible thing. And you are not doing it alone either. I won't let you. Her touch was an anchor in the storm. Her words were a lighthouse. He looked at her, at this brilliant, fierce, resilient woman whose spirit was as wild and beautiful as the storm raging around them. He saw in her the same unbreakable will that he had seen in his mother, in Sakura, the very will he had sworn to protect. He reached up and gently brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. Your dream, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It reminds me of what I was fighting for. The chance for everyone to chase their own dream, no matter how big. Seeing you, it makes me remember what's worth saving. In the heart of the tempest, surrounded by the chaos of wind and water, they found a small, perfect pocket of calm. It was a shared moment of truth, a confession not of fleeting attraction, but of a deep, foundational connection. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the island washed clean and sparkling in the morning sun. Naruto found Hancock in a secluded meadow overlooking the sea. She was not dressed in her royal finery, but in the practical attire of a Kuja warrior. She moved with a deadly grace, her kicks powerful enough to split the air. Her haki a palpable aura of strength around her. She stopped as he approached, turning to face him. Her expression was not angry or demanding, but it was intensely focused. The games were over. We need to speak, she stated. Her voice even. I know, he replied. My declaration, my vow to stand with you. It was not merely a political move, Naruto. She looked him directly in the eye, her pride a formidable shield. But her gaze held a flicker of vulnerability. I have spent my life using my beauty as a weapon and a wall. It has protected me, but it has also isolated me. Men have either feared me or groveled before me. Neither has ever seen me. She took a step closer. Straw Hat Luffy. He was the first who was immune. I mistook his foolishness for strength. I became infatuated with T. He idea of a man my power could not sway. She shook her head slightly. But you are different. You were immune not because you were a fool, but because you looked past the facade. You saw a warrior, a leader. Her voice grew softer, laced with a genuine confusion that she, the pirate empress, had likely never felt before. You fight with the power of a demon, but show the mercy of a saint. You carry the fate of the world on your shoulders, but you took the time to thank my chefs for the meal they prepared. I do not understand you, Uzumaki Naruto. And it is infuriating. She stood before him, the all-powerful empress laying her pride and her confusion at his feet. She was asking for clarity. She deserved the truth. Hancock, he began, his voice filled with a profound respect. "When I look at you, I do see your beauty. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." A faint blush touched her cheeks, but he continued before she could react. "But that's the least interesting thing about you. It's like admiring the paint on a battleship. It's nice, but it's not what makes the ship powerful." He met her gaze, his own unwavering. "I see a woman who was a slave and who rose up to become an empress. I see a leader who loves her people so fiercely she would declare war on the world to protect them. I see a warrior whose will is so strong it can bring men to their knees without ever throwing a punch. That is your strength. Your beauty is a shadow. Your will is the sun. That is what I admire. That is the woman I am proud to call my ally." For the first time since he had met her, Boa Hancock was truly, completely speechless. He had not just resisted her power, he had defined her by a different one. He had seen the truth of her, the core of her that she herself had hidden behind the mask of the pirate empress for so long. The last remnants of her childish infatuation with Luffy burned away like mist in the sun, replaced by something far deeper, far more powerful. It was a love born not of a devil fruit's curse, but of absolute, soul-deep respect. Later that day, the four of them stood on the black cliffs of Evelgard, looking out at the endless blue horizon. The path ahead was terrifying. The Void Sovereign was coming. The world government was hunting them. But the atmosphere was different. The despair was gone, replaced by a quiet, shared resolve. Naruto looked at the three women beside him. Nami, the brilliant mind with a heart as vast as the oceans she charted. Robin, the wise soul who had turned a lifetime of pain into a well of profound strength. Hancock, the indomitable will who ruled a nation and had offered it all for his sake. They were not just his allies. They were his anchors. They were the tides of emotion that kept his own inner storm from consuming him. The promise had been made, not in words, but in shared trials and bared souls. They were his, and he was theirs. And together, they would face the coming darkness. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Celestial Gambit. The War Council was held in the quiet intimacy of the Thousand Sunnies Aquarium Lounge. The gentle bubbling of the water and the slow, graceful dance of the fish were a stark contrast to the grim topic at hand. They had survived the assassins of CP0, but the victory had left a bitter taste. Strix's parting words echoed in their minds, a chilling testament to a conspiracy far older than any of them. "You are not the first," Robin repeated, her fingers steepled before her as she paced the grassy floor. Her eyes held the focused, obsessive gleam of a historian on the verge of a breakthrough. Strix's words were not a simple threat. They were a confirmation. "The world government knows what the Void Sovereign is. I believe their knowledge is tied to the one event the Y have spent 800 years trying to erase from history. The Void Century," Nami breathed, looking up from a chart she had been studying. "Precisely," Robin affirmed. "The ancient texts we've found speak of a great enemy. A hollow sky. What if the ancient kingdom wasn't destroyed by the 20 kingdoms that would later form the world government? What if it was destroyed by the Void Sovereign, and the world government simply rose from its ashes, claiming victory and burying the terrifying truth?" A heavy silence settled over the group. The theory was audacious, but it fit the pieces together with a terrifying logic. "If that's true," Naruto said, his voice low, "then the truth isn't scattered on some forgotten island. It's in the one place they've been guarding it the most." Hancock, who had been listening with an empress's stoic patience, finally spoke. "Mary Geoise." The name of the holy land of the celestial dragons fell like a death sentence. To go there was to invite annihilation. But as they looked at each other, a single, unspoken consensus formed. They had to know. They had to learn what the government knew, what weaknesses the sovereign might have, what preparations had been made. To fight blind was to accept defeat. "It's impossible," Sanji muttered, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. "Security there is absolute." "Perhaps not," Nami said, a straight GIC glint in her eye as she unrolled a massive map of the Red Line. "The reverie is about to begin. Kings and queens from all over the world will be gathering. Security will be focused on them. Politi. Cal Chaos is the perfect cover for a storm." An insane, impossibly daring plan began to take shape, each member contributing their unique skills to the gambit. Hancock, with her former warlord status, would be their key. She would sail her Kuja vessel, the perfume Yuta, directly to the port of Mary Geoise, brazenly requesting an audience with the Gorosei. Her pretext: to negotiate the terms of her neutrality regarding the Uzumaki Naruto situation. It was an act of such supreme arrogance, suggesting she might betray her new alliance for the right price, that the Gorosei's own arrogance would compel them to hear her out. While Hancock played the part of the Mercurial Empress, the infiltration team, Naruto, Nami, and Robin, would make their move. The ascent up the Red Line was a tense, surreal journey. Riding the massive gondolas, the Kuja ship was lifted into the heavens, finally docking at the home of the so-called gods. The air was different here, thin, clean, and heavy with an après-ski. Vague silence and the stench of absolute power. Naruto, disguised by his own transformation jutsu as a tall, silent Kuja guard, felt his sage mode recoil from the sheer concentration of negative emotions. Radiating from the city, the blissful ignorance of the visiting royals, the casual cruelty of the celestial dragons, and the deep, bottomless despair of the slaves who moved the very streets beneath their feet. Hancock, every inch the imperious pirate empress, made her formal request. As predicted, the Gorosei, intrigued by this unexpected development, granted her an audience in 1 hour. The clock was ticking. It's now or never, Nami whispered from their hiding place within the ship. She held a modified klima tact. Get ready. She pointed the staff towards the sky. A single, small black cloud shot upwards, dissipating into the thin air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the moisture in the air began to coalesce at an unnatural rate. A thick, rolling fog, as dense as cotton, poured in from the sea, blanketing the pristine city in a gray shroud. The guards shouted in alarm, blaming the freakish weather of the Grand Line. Under the cover of the fog, the trio slipped away from the ship. Nami led the way, her senses, honed by years of reading the weather, allowing her to navigate the mist. Naruto had transformed himself, Robin, and Nami into nondescript servants, their features plain, their uniforms drab, rendering them invisible in the chaotic shuffle of the city. His sage mode was their true guide, a living map of the life signatures around them. He could feel the cold, disciplined energy of the CP0 guards, the fluttering heartbeats of the staff, and steered them through the gaps in the patrols. Robin's knowledge of ancient architecture proved invaluable. The castle's design is from the early days of the world government, she whispered, pointing towards an unassuming relief carving on a wall. These patterns often conceal service passages. They moved like ghosts, through the heart of their enemy's power, a perfectly synchronized unit of planning, stealth, and knowledge. Finally, they reached their destination, a heavily guarded corridor leading to the Gorosei's audience chamber. Here, Naruto's role shifted. He created a dozen clones, transforming them into various panicked nobles and flustered guards, and sent them running down an adjacent hallway, shouting about a security breach at the main gate. The real guards, distracted by the commotion, were drawn away. It gave them the window they needed. They found the hidden room behind a tapestry in the Gorosei's private waiting area. It was a vault, its door made of a stone that seemed to drink the light. Inside, there were no books. The room was circular, and in its center stood 5 pillars of pure, polished white stone that felt unnaturally cold to the touch. They were covered in the familiar, blocky script of the poneglyphs. Celestial poneglyphs, Robin breathed, her voice filled with a reverent awe that was quickly consumed by dawning horror as she began to read. Her hands traced the characters, her eyes flying across the text. The story they told was a heresy of cosmic proportions. It spoke of the ancient kingdom, not as a den of evil, but as a civilization of brilliant scientists who had achieved unimaginable power, even learning to harness the very energy of the stars. It spoke of their greatest fear, the hollow sky, the silent star, the void sovereign. It spoke of a great war, fought not with cannons, but with weapons that could warp reality itself. And it spoke of betrayal. As Robin reached the final, horrifying passage, a heavy, grinding sound echoed through the vault. The stone door slid shut, plunging them into near darkness. A hidden panel on the far wall slid open, silhouetting 5 familiar figures. The Gorosei. It is a fascinating story, is it not, Nico Robin? The tall, blonde elder said, his voice echoing in the confined space. A pity you will not live to share it. It had been a trap. Hancock's audience, the lax security, all of it was a lie to lure them in. "You knew we were coming," Naruto said, stepping in front of Nami and Robin, his body tensing for battle. The elder with the long, white beard, who resembled Gandhi, smiled a cold, thin smile. "A beast that has been wounded will always return to the scene of its injury. Strix's report on your unique abilities was most illuminating. We prepared a suitable reception." The 5 elders stepped into the room, and the temperature seemed to drop. They were no longer just politicians, they were predators. The swordsman drew his blade, a magnificent katana that seemed to weep shadows. The bald, scar-faced elder cracked his knuckles, and the very air around his fists distorted. The fight was an explosion of desperate, impossible survival. Naruto entered Six Paths Sage mode instantly, the golden cloak of power a defiant sun in the tomb-like vault. He sent 1,000 clones to swarm them, but it was like throwing pebbles against a tsunami. The swordsman moved, a blur of motion, and 100 clones were bisected by a single, invisible slash that vibrated with a dark, ancient haki. The blonde elder vanished and reappeared behind Naruto, his kick so fast that Naruto barely had time to block it with a truth-seeking orb. The force of the blow still sent a shockwave that cracked the vault's wall. These men were not just strong. They were monsters, each one a calamity in their own right. Naruto roared, Kurama's chakra erupting from him to form 4 massive, golden arms. They became a protective cage, shielding Nami and Robin from the chaos as Naruto battled the 5 elders with everything he had. It wasn't a battle to win. It was a desperate, losing battle to buy time. As he pushed his Sage mode to its absolute limit, trying to track 5 opponents who moved faster than thought, his senses suddenly expanded, pushed by the sheer pressure. They plunged downwards, past the floor of the vault, past the foundations of Pangaea Castle, past the very bedrock of the Red Line itself. And he felt it. Deep in the frozen, secret heart of Mary Geoise, a presence resided. It was not like the Void Sovereign, a loud, hungry storm. This was a silence older than the world. A power so immense and so absolute it felt like the gravitational center of the entire planet. It was ancient, cold, and eternal. It was not sleeping. It was watching. And in that moment, Naruto knew, with a certainty that froze the blood in his veins, that he was looking at the true god of this world. His senses snapped back to the vault, his eyes wide with a new, more profound terror. The Gorosei noticed his momentary distraction, the direction of his horrified spiritual gaze. For a split second, a flicker of chi looked like genuine fear crossed their own impassive faces before it was suppressed. "It seems the beast can smell its master," the elder with the birthmark on his forehead chuckled, a sound devoid of any humor. Seeing Naruto's spirit was on the verge of breaking, he decided to deliver the final blow. "You fight for a world you do not understand, boy," he said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "You believe us to be tyrants. You are wrong. We are this world's gardeners, pruning the weeds so the garden may survive. 800 years ago, the ancient kingdom's arrogance was a weed. Their power grew so bright it threatened to attract the sovereign and burn the entire world to cinders. So we made a choice," the swordsman continued, cleaning his blade. "The ultimate pragmatic decision. The sovereign was hungry, so we gave it a meal." The horrifying truth slammed into Naruto, Nami, and Robin with the force of a physical blow. You sacrificed them," Robin whispered, her voice trembling. Her life's entire quest culminating in this one, monstrous revelation. "We saved the world by feeding the beast a single, infected limb," the blonde elder corrected. "In exchange for the sacrifice of the ancient kingdom. The sovereign was sated. It agreed to slumber for 800 years. We built our world, our peace, on that sacrifice. A peace that has lasted for centuries." He smiled. "And now, the time is almost up. Its awakening is inevitable. Your arrival is merely an unforeseen complication. You are not the start of the apocalypse. You are simply an appetizer that has arrived before the main course." They weren't going to stop it. They were going to manage it. They would sacrifice islands, kingdoms, continents, anything to maintain their own power and appease the entity they had made a pact with. Naruto saw it all in a flash. There was no winning here. There was only escape. The truth had to get out. Now, he screamed. He brought his hands together, pouring the last of his and Kurama's energy into a single, dense sphere. It was a Biju bomb, twisted and merged with the cutting power of a Rasenshuriken. He didn't aim it at the Gorosei. He aimed it at the ceiling. The explosion was catastrophic. The vault, a structure that had stood for 800 years, was blown apart. As stone and history rained down, creating a cloud of chaos, Naruto grabbed Nami and Robin. He had one clone left, hidden on the perfume Yuta, maintaining a summoning link. Reverse summoning jutsu. With a final, desperate surge of chakra, their bodies contorted and vanished in a puff of smoke. Just as the Gorosei emerged from the dust, their faces masks of cold, unrestrained fury. They reappeared on the deck of the Kuja ship in a heap, battered, bruised, and spiritually broken. Hancock, seeing their state, issued a single, sharp command, "Sail." Now, as the ship sped away from the red line, the three of them huddled on the deck. The gambit was a success. They had the truth, but the prize was a poison that seeped into their souls. The world wasn't just threatened by a monster from the void. It was ruled by monsters from within, a pantheon of gods who had built their HEA. Then on a foundation of lies and a pact with the abyss. Robin was weeping, not for her lost home, but for a history more tragic than she had ever imagined. Nami was shaking uncontrollably, her strategy. Sea-mind unable to process an enemy that held all the cards. And Naruto stared back at the receding red line, his face grim. The lines of battle had been redrawn. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a war against the gods. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Unraveling World. The journey from the red line was a voyage through a sea of ghosts. The infiltration team was safe aboard the perfume Yuta, but their spirits were shattered. They possessed the most terrible secret in the history of the world, a truth so monstrous it poisoned the very air they breathed. The world government wasn't just a corrupt regime. It was a doomsday cult, 800 years in the making, whose high priests were waiting patiently for their god of nothingness to return. Robin had retreated into a shell of scholarly silence, locking herself in her cabin with copies of the poneglyph texts she had frantically transcribed. She wasn't just a historian anymore, she was an eulogist, writing the final, true history of a world that was already dead and simply didn't know it yet. Nami's hands, usually so steady on her charts and instruments, trembled slightly. Her mastery over the weather felt like a child's game in tea. He face of a storm that could unmake reality. Hancock was a statue of cold fury, her regal composure a thin sheet of ice over a boiling ocean of rage at the celestial dragon's ultimate betrayal. And Naruto felt a strange, terrifying calm. The guilt was gone, burned away by the sheer, absolute evil of the Gorosei's plan. His burden was no longer one of responsibility, but of opposition. He was not the cause of this anymore. He was the only cure. The shinobi who had once fought to protect a single village now had to protect an entire world from its own shepherds. They were 3 days out from Mary Geoise, sailing towards the relative chaos of the new world to rendezvous with the rest of the Straw Hats, when the sky began to bleed. It started without warning. High above them, the brilliant blue sky, a shade Naruto had come to love, began to fray at the edges. A point of darkness appeared, and then it tore open, not with a sound, but with a sickening, silent violence. It was a wound in the fabric of the dimension. A long, jagged tear that did not leak light, but a thick, oily darkness. A void scar. From the scar, they began to fall. Hundreds, then thousands of them. The gray, misty husks from Chromia. The featureless shades, and other, more twisted variations, things with too many limbs, things that slithered on unseen winds, a silent, writhing rain of despair. They hit the water and the ocean itself seemed to recoil, the vibrant blue turning a murky, dead gray where they touched. Before anyone could even process the horror, the Den Mushi in the communications room began to scream. Not just one, but dozens of them, all at once. Calls were being routed through their emergency frequency, a chaotic symphony of panic from across the globe. A frantic voice from Amari, nay captain near Fishman Island, screamed about a black wound opening at the bottom of the sea, the darkness swallowing the light of the Eve tree. A panicked royal guard from Dressrosa reported a scar tearing the sky above the King's Plateau. The citizens' passion and joy draining away into a listless apathy. A call from a revolutionary army outpost in the North Blue described a blizzard of gray snow. That stole the warmth from the air and the will from men's hearts. It was happening. Everywhere. The unraveling had begun. The world scrambled to react. Honest Marines, like Smoker and the men of G5, fought desperately to protect civilians, but they were fighting an enemy their swords couldn't cut and their bullets couldn't harm. Confusion reigned. But from the highest echelons of power, the response was swift, deliberate, and chilling. A global broadcast was issued by Fleet Admiral Akainu. His face, a mask of grim authority, was broadcast onto every screen. He did not speak of an invasion. He spoke of the hour of judgment, a divine cleansing brought about by the world's unchecked sin and piracy. He declared a state of absolute martial law, ordering all marine forces to abandon outlying territories and consolidate around the Red Line. Their mission was not to save the people. It was to protect the gods. It was a betrayal so complete, so blatant, that it shattered the world's faith in its protectors. The world government was sacrificing them all. But in the midst of the despair, a different signal hijacked the airwaves. The grinning, feathered visage of Big News Morgans appeared, his voice brimming with manic glee. Kawahahaha. The government sells you apocalypse, but Morgans gives you the truth. While the Marines run home to hide under their beds, there are those who still fight. Look, people of the world. Look at the maelstrom of hope in a sea of despair. His broadcast showed images from Amazon Lily. The Kuja warriors, led by Sandersonia and Marigold, were not hiding. Their hockey-laced arrows were being infused with small amounts of nature energy taught to them by Naruto's clones, allowing them to fight back against the tide of husks. Then, the feed cut to the Straw Hats, the Kuja, and their golden-haired ally, their ships sailing directly towards the largest of the Void Scars. There you have it, Morgans crowed. The Pirate Alliance, led by the mysterious Maelstrom, Naruto and the Straw Hat crew, are not running. They are on the attack. This isn't Judgment Day, my dear readers. This is a war, and the story of the century is just beginning. Morgans B. Broadcast was a spark in a world of gathering darkness. It showed the people that they had not been completely abandoned. It turned the Straw Hat Alliance into a global symbol of resistance. That night, on the deck of the Sunny, now the flagship of their desperate fleet, a quiet pact was made. The sky above was no longer black, but a sickly purple, illuminated by the eerie glow of a dozen distant Void Scars. The world was on fire, and this small ship was a tiny, fragile island of defiance in an ocean of encroaching doom. Naruto, Nami, Robin, and Hancock stood together at the prow, watching the wounded sky. The time for fear and doubt was over, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They might not live to see the dawn. It's beautiful, in a terrifying way, Nami said, her voice a soft whisper against the wind. Like watching the birth of a new, terrible star. It is the end of an old one, Robin corrected, her hand resting on the railing. The end of the world the Gorosei built. Hancock was silent, her gaze fixed on the largest scar, her eyes burning with a cold fire that promised retribution. Naruto looked at the three of them, his heart swelling with a feeling so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. Love, respect, loyalty, the words were too small. They were the pillars of his new world, the foundation upon which he would build his final stand. I don't know what happens tomorrow, he said, his voice quiet but steady. I don't know if we can win. But I know that I'm not fighting to save the world anymore. I'm fighting for the world we're going to build after this. The one where you get to finish your map, he said, looking at Nami. Her hand found his, her fingers lacing through his own, a silent promise to navigate him through this final storm. The one where you finally get to tell the true history. He continued, his eyes meeting Robin's. She gave him a small, watery smile and placed her hand on his shoulder. A promise of shared knowledge, of a past that would finally be understood. And the one where a great empress can rule a nation that fears no one, he finished, looking at Hancock. She turned her gaze from the horizon to him, and in her eyes, he saw not the pirate empress, but a woman who had pledged her entire being to his cause. She stepped forward and placed her hand over his and Nami's, her touch a promise of unwavering, absolute strength. This was their moment. It was not one of passion or lust. It was a warrior's vow, a soldier's pact on the eve of the final battle. It was the quiet, profound consummation of their bond, a commitment of 4 souls against oblivion. It was a promise, sealed not with a kiss, but with the shared, unspoken pledge to survive, to live, and to create a future worthy of the sacrifice. The next morning, the painful, pragmatic decisions were made. The threat was global, their response had to be as well. The Revolutionary Army, Robin stated, pointing at a map. My captain, Dragon, will understand the true nature of this threat. The Gorosei are his ultimate enemy. He will not stand by. I must go to him, to coordinate our forces. Sanji, Frankie, Brooke, and a retinue of Kuja warriors would go with her, Our mission to unite the shadows against the coming dark. The seas are in chaos, Hancock declared. Pirate crews are running wild, the Marines are in retreat. A strong naval force is needed to court the innocent and battle the creatures emerging from the sea. I will take the Yuta and the Kuja fleet and command the waves. Her strength and her reputation were uniquely suited to bring order to the lawless oceans. Painful goodbyes were exchanged. There were no tears, only firm embraces and promises to meet again on the other side of victory. Then, only the core remained. Naruto and Nami, with Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and Chopper at their side, sailed the Thousand Sunny towards the abyss itself, the largest void scar, a gaping maw of darkness that pulsed like a diseased heart, the likely epicenter of the entire invasion. As they drew closer, the sea grew still and gray, the air thick with an energy that felt like static and tasted like grief. A figure emerged from the scar, floating towards them. It was not like the silent Tacitus or the mindless husks. This harbinger was formed from a chaotic, shifting cloud of what looked like television static, and from it emanated 1,000 stolen sounds, a baby's cry, a lover's whisper, a dying man's last words. It was a creature of pure, weaponized nostalgia and pain. This was Logos, the voice and herald of the sovereign. It stopped 100 meters from the ship, its form coalescing into a more stable, humanoid shape. And then it spoke, not with one voice, but with many, all layered over each other in a horrifying chorus. But one voice cut through the cacophony. A voice Naruto had not heard in years, a voice from his dreams and his deepest regrets. You've grown strong, Naruto, the herald said, and the voice was that of Jiraiya. Naruto froze, his blood turning to ice. But you are still so foolish, Logos continued, and the voice shifted, becoming the warm, gentle tone of his mother, Kushina. You run from home, only to lead the darkness to a new one. Your strength is a beacon that only invites pain, the creature whispered, now with the calm, authoritative voice of his father, Minato. You cannot protect them. You could not protect us. It raised a hand, not to attack, but in a gesture of welcome. The master is weary of whispers and shadows, beacon. It has sent me to deliver its final sermon. There is no victory in struggle. There is no peace in life. There is only the great, beautiful, final truth of non-existence. The herald's featureless face seemed to smile. Come, Uzumaki Naruto. Let me save you. Let me sing you the song of the end of all things. The Thousand Sunny sailed on, a tiny spark of defiance approaching the monster that wore the voices of the dead. The final lesson was about to begin. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Will of the Dawn. The air before the Thousand Sunny grew thick and cold, charged with a malevolent energy that was the antithesis of life. Logos, the herald of the void, floated before them. A vortex of stolen memories and weaponized grief. Its form, a shifting cloud of static, was an insult to the very concept of being, and its voice, the voices of the dead, was a dagger in Naruto's heart. You failed them all, little beacon, it whispered with Kushina's warmth, a warmth that now felt like a freezing burn. And you will fail these new friends as well. It is your nature. It is the nature of all life. To struggle, to hope, and ultimately, to be extinguished. The void offers a kinder path. Naruto stood frozen at the prow, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed at him to attack, to obliterate the monster that dared to wear his mother's voice. But he was paralyzed by the sheer, blasphemous horror of it. It was Luffy who broke the spell. With a roar of pure, uncomplicated rage, he shot forward, his fist, blackened with armament hockey, stretching across the water. Shut up. You're a fake. Naruto's nakama are right here. The fist slammed into Logos, but it was like punching smoke. The herald's form dissolved and reformed, completely unharmed. Yet, the attack had served its purpose. Luffy's shout, a simple declaration of an unshakable truth, was a bucket of cold water on Naruto's grief-stricken mind. He looked at his captain, at Zoro drawing his swords with a grim scowl, at Nami standing resolute beside him, and the paralysis broke. "You're right, Luffy," Naruto said, a dangerous calm settling over him as he entered sage mode. The golden pigment flared around his eyes. "It's just a cheap ghost. Let's exorcise it." Logos let out a sound that might have been a chuckle, a discordant harmony of 1,000 dead laughs. "So be it. The master grows impatient. The world's heart is close. I shall go and open the final door. Follow if you dare. Witness the true, beautiful face of salvation." With that, the herald turned and shot towards the horizon, a comet of black static leaving a dead, gray trail in the sea. "The world's heart?" Nami questioned, her eyes wide. "It doesn't matter what it is," Zoro growled. "We just have to get there first and cut him down." The chase was on. The Thousand Sunny, pushed by a wind Nami summoned with desperate intensity, surged forward, its sunny figurehead a beacon of defiance. Their journey took them into a sea unlike any they had ever sailed. The water was the color of slate. The sky a permanent, bruised twilight from the glow of the void scars. Hordes of husks and shades rose from the depths, swarming the ship, only to be cut down by Zoro's blades, blasted by Usopp's pop greens, or kicked into oblivion by Luffy's furious attacks. As they sailed deeper into the heart of the storm, the Den Den Mushi on Nami's wrist, a private line linked to their scattered allies, crackled to life. "Sonny, this is the Yuta," Hancock's voice came through, crisp and commanding over the sound of explosions and crashing waves. "We have engaged the primary swarm in the South Blue. We have them contained. Show this hollow god the true strength of a man who has earned the love of an empress. We are with you." Minutes later, another call. It was Robin, her voice calm as ever, but laced with an undercurrent of fierce determination. "Sonny, this is Robin. We have made contact with the Revolutionary Army. Dragon has committed his full forces. We are liberating his lands in the West Blue and establishing safe zones. The will of the world is not yet broken. Show them the truth of the dawn you carry, Naruto-san." Their voices, their victories, were a transfusion of strength directly into Naruto's soul. He was not alone. His family was fighting with him, for him, across the entire world. This wasn't his battle, it was theirs. Finally, they saw it. An island, shrouded in a mist that seemed to bend reality, an island that should not exist. As they passed through the mist, the world became quiet, serene. Laugh Tale. It was not the boisterous pirate paradise of legend. It was an island of sublime, ancient beauty. Massive, crystalline trees pulsed with a soft inner light, and a field of glowing, ethereal flowers hummed with a gentle energy. At the island's center, a colossal cherry blossom tree, larger than any giant, stood as the heart of the world, its roots dug deep into the very concept of reality. It was a place of immense life force, the world's anchor. And at its base, the void scar was torn wide open, a gaping, screaming wound of non-existence. Logos floated before it, its hand outstretched, pouring darkness into the heart of the world. The Thousand Sunny beached itself. And they charged. The final battle began. Luffy went straight for Logos, his gear forth form a monstrous bastion of haki and fury. Zoro became a three-bladed whirlwind, intercepting the tendrils of void energy that lashed out from the herald. But Logos was on another level. It moved through space, its body intangible, its attacks warping the very ground they stood on. It focused its psychological assault on Naruto. "Why do you struggle?" it whispered in Jiraiya's voice as Naruto dodged a blast of darkness. "Life is an endless cycle of pain. Friends die. Dreams fade. All paths lead to the grave. Is it not better to simply stop? To rest in the perfect, peaceful silence?" It showed him a vision. A quiet porch, a warm sun. An older version of himself, surrounded by his friends, his parents. All of them smiling, content. The vision offered an end to strife. The temptation to let go, to accept the peace of nothingness, was a sweet, seductive poison. He was faltering, his attacks growing weaker, his spirit wavering under the constant psychic barrage. "Naruto, don't you dare listen to that liar." Nami's voice cut through the despair. She stood her ground, Her Chromia tact held high. She couldn't fight the herald directly, but she could fight its world. She pointed her staff at the gray, oppressive sky, and with a surge of will, created a small, perfect, V-brand rainbow that arched directly over the battlefield. It was a tiny, beautiful, utterly defiant act. A splash of color in a world of gray. We have a whole world to map, you and I. And a future to build. Don't you let this thing take that away from us. Her words, her simple, vibrant act of hope, were the spark. Naruto looked at the rainbow, then at his friends fighting and bleeding for him. He thought of Hancock commanding the seas and Robin rallying the armies of revolution. He was not an echo of a dead world. He was the heart of a new one. The despair was burned away, replaced by a white-hot fire. He had been trying to fight the void with his own power, the power of the Sage of Six Paths. But that power was from another world. To protect this one, he needed to become a part of it. He reached out, not just for nature energy, but for the very will of his friends. He felt Luffy's indomitable freedom, Zoro's hardened ambition, Nami's boundless hope, Robin's resilient wisdom, Hancock's fierce love. He felt the Haki of this world, the manifestation of pure will, and drew it into himself, merging it with his chakra. The golden cloak of his Six Paths Sage mode erupted around him, but then it changed. Streaks of black and crimson lightning, the colors of Conqueror's Haki, began to crackle and swirl within the gold. The truth-seeking orbs behind him spun into a vortex, a swirling maelstrom of divine energy and mortal will. This was something new, the will of the maelstrom. It's over, Logos, Naruto said, his voice now a calm fusion of his own and Kurama's, resonating with a power that made the herald recoil for the first time. You talk about the peace of nothingness. But you've never seen the strength of a promise. He realized he could not destroy the void. It was an absence, a concept. You cannot kill nothing. But his ancestors, the Uzumaki, were masters of a different art. Not destruction, sealing. He would not kill the god of nothingness. He would become its jailer. He flew towards the herald. A swirling vortex of golden, black, and red. He held out his hand, and a Rasengan formed, but it was unlike any before. It was not just wind, not just chakra. It was a swirling galaxy of pure hope, containing the light of the crystalline trees, the colors of Nami's rainbow, the iron will of his friends. This is our answer, he roared. The combined will of this world. Maelstrom. Rasengan of bonds. He didn't slam it into Logos. He placed it gently against the herald's chest. There was no explosion. Instead, the Rasengan bloomed. Ethereal chains of pure, golden light erupted from it, shooting across the sky of Laugh Tale and then the entire world. From every void scar, from every corner of the planet, the essence of the void, the despair and the emptiness, was pulled back. Drawn along the golden chains into Logos, the focal point. The herald screamed, a chorus of a billion stolen voices, as it was forcibly filled with the very power it served, becoming a container for the sovereign's essence. The energy was too much for the herald's form to bear. It began to swell, to crack, on the verge of a reality-destroying explosion. This was the final step. Naruto placed his other hand on his own stomach. Dad, Mom, Master Jiraiya, I get it now. This is my story. He performed a single, complex hand sign. Uzumaki sealing art. 8 trigrams divine vortex seal. The spiraling emblem of his clan blazed to life on his palm. He pressed it against the condensed form of Logos. The herald's body dissolved, not into nothingness, but into pure, black energy, which was then sucked, screaming, into Naruto's body. A new, complex seal, a black, swirling vortex, burned itself into the skin over his navel. The golden cloak vanished. The Haki receded. Naruto fell from the sky, caught by a rubbery arm. Across the world, the void scars sealed themselves shut, leaving clean, blue skies behind. The husks and shades dissolved into harmless motes of dust. The unraveling was over. The silence of the void was replaced by the rising, triumphant cheer of a world that had been saved. Weeks later, the world was in the chaotic, hopeful process of rebuilding. The world government, its lies and cowardice exposed, had collapsed, its future uncertain. The Revolutionary Army and the remnants of the honest Marines were working to establish a new order. History was being rewritten, this time with the truth. On the deck of the Thousand Sunny, Anchored in the turquoise waters of a peaceful, unnamed island, Naruto watched the sun rise. The new seal on his stomach was a constant, quiet presence. A sleeping god chained in his soul. But it was not a burden. It was a responsibility he had chosen, a promise he had kept. He felt a hand slide into his. He looked over and saw Nami, her smile as bright as the dawn. Robin came to stand on his other side, closing a book with a soft thud, her expression serene. A moment later, Hancock joined them, her presence a quiet, powerful warmth at his back. They didn't speak. No words were necessary. They simply stood together, a family forged in the crucible of a dying world, now watching the birth of a new one. He was home. He was loved. He was no longer a hero without a world, but a man with three of them standing right beside him. The maelstrom was at peace, its purpose found not in rage, but in the calm, steady anchor of his bonds. They looked out at the horizon, at the endless ocean of adventure that awaited them, their future as bright and limitless as the rising sun. Chapter 10 End.